So as we're getting started, I just wanted to share a little bit more about what we do. As of in the last few months, I think there's been a transition, and I used to be the clinic manager for Smithfield, and that has been really given to someone to another capable manager. And I am now starting a program right now that's called autism. It's really autism and ID, but we're talking about autism probably more because it's more of an up and coming topic and concern, and ID treatment, but as an autism treatment manager or program. So where it will go, the potential of it is kind of exciting for me. And we hope to really not only do outpatient therapy, but training and other consultations and other visions that I feel like I have, but it's just, they're just like little seeds right now. So part of the reason that this training became a thing is because as I've worked with a variety of populations over the a long time, is that I feel like what I recognize is that it's often, how do I say it? I feel like autism sometimes is looked at as a like a children's disorder, and I feel like that's really the challenge, is that it's not. It starts at that age, and a lot of things that can happen at that age can really change the trajectory of a person's life. However, it doesn't leave them when they're like 20 or 18 or 25. It is a lifelong issue, part of who they are. It doesn't separate from who they are. And I think that's one of my passions, is just kind of how do we prepare adolescents for adulthood. And then of course, in a month, on December 1st, I'm going to be doing a training that is specifically focused on helping parents to manage and to kind of think vision wise, regardless of how old their children are that have autism, to be thinking of the future and how to be intentional in that way. So I'm going to pull up my actual training here. Let me pull this up. So why is this? It's always a little tricky when you got Zoom going on at the same time. So pardon me. So I wanted to let me take a pause here for you to just see what our plan is. I like to give a plan, and part of the reason I like to give a plan is because it's good for you to know what we're doing. But also, I think this is my modeling to you what people on the autism spectrum need. They need predictability. They need to know this is how we're going to kind of do things. Now, there could be a little bit of variance, but for the most part, this is my plan. And that sometimes helps a client that you may be working with. The way I'm writing, I actually did this training. I did it that there's like adolescents in my meeting. And I didn't do that because I thought that I was going to have a bunch, 30 people who are about 15 or 12. I really did this because sometimes the wording that we use as grownups, we need to kind of rethink that. We need to think about how we manage and how we communicate with those who are teenagers or who are on the who have autism. And so I think that's why I talk to them that way. It actually makes it more fun too, because it's just a different way of kind of breaking things up. So let me kind of take things, do this. Let's see. What I'm trying to do. I just want to check one thing to kind of pull it up so I can. How about do that? I thought that was already done. Okay, so all right, let me go. So as I said earlier, that growing up just takes a lot of time, and there is a lot of, there's a lot of tough steps. And so any of you who are parents know that this is how life is. What they say is long days and short years, and being intentional about it can make a different thing. And so children grow up fast, regardless of if they have, if autism is a part of their makeup or not, but autism adds an extra piece to it. And sometimes because of the issues that are going on with autism, with the autism neurodiversity issues, that it can be almost like, let's just get through day to day, and we're not focused at all on the fact that, wow, they're already 15 and we don't know, where should we go from there? So that's kind of the focus. So that's part of why we're doing this. Okay. What is really okay? So I wanted to start with a poem. I have mentioned her. If any of you who had went to my training in the springtime, I read one of Kim's poems. I am happy to say that Kim and I are talking, and we are planning that she would have it be in this winter time that she will be doing a training with us. She has autism as well, but she didn't learn about her autism diagnosis until she was in her 20s, after she had got her obtained her occupational therapist master's degree. So she has a lot of understanding of sensory issues, and I'm so super excited that she's going to be able to talk to us. But also I wanted her to kind of give you a picture on how we can help more. And so she has a website. I love and it has a lot of information. So that's why I have this. So I'm going to just read this to you to kind of set the tone of these are our clients. Who am I? I am not a diagnosis, and I am not a label. I am not an eating disorder. I am not autism or a sensory processing disorder. I am not a failure. I am not worthless. I am not stupid. I am not a mistake, nor am I my mistakes. I cannot be measured by a size, a number, an expectation, a list of rules. My purpose and my worth are not tangible things. They are infinite, and I may not see them sometimes or believe that they are there, but they are there. They are simply because I am. Who am I? I am brave. I am strong. I am creative. I am innovative. I am compassionate, kind, and gentle. I am honest and sincere. I am carefree, playful, funny, quirky, unique, genuine, and innocent. I am a thinker. I love to solve problems. I like to think outside the box. I am perceptive and intuitive. I am social, but in my own way. I am full of energy, helpful, accepting of all people. I am Kim. I like to climb and build and create. I thirst to be outside, to smell the fresh air and to feel the dirt beneath my feet, to touch wise trees and hear the orchestra of birds, crickets, rustling leaves, and the pitter patter of my moving feet. I enjoy yoga, walking, running, stretching, twirling, jumping, being in my body with my one mind and one body. I yearn to help others, to love unconditionally, to accept non-judgmentally. I have autism. I say things differently. The world moves very fast, and I am often unable to keep up. But that's okay. I don't have to. I see details and figure out things others often can't because I notice. I create my own solutions. I think in pictures. My words are visual representations. I can't always verbalize my thoughts. I can be slow to learn or mishear what is said. This can be frustrating, but patience and persistence and not giving up is the key. I note beauty in everything, everyone, every animal. I feel and see in colors and shapes and textures. I don't like loud or busy places because they make my ears bleed and my eyes burn. Certain noises, tones, pitches are deafening, and I have to cover my ears or wear headphones. I sometimes listen to with my eyes closed, so this way I can hear and see what is happening. I need for deep pressure to calm down, and I may hum loudly, fidget, or smell things in order to focus. I may act a little immature or childlike at times, and I may do strange things, but that's okay because otherwise I would not be able to interact with the world, with you, and with me. I am learning to be with me so that I can be with you and in the world. I am learning to work with through my struggles to get up when I fall down, not dwell on my mistakes. It is okay to ask for help, and it is okay to receive it. I am not an eating disorder. I am not autism. I am not sensory processing disorder. I am not my actions. I am not my thoughts. I am none of these things. I am Kim, and that is enough. So I wanted to start with that because it's important for us to see people as people, regardless of their neurodiversity, neurotypicality. It is compassion, and it is understanding that there's a reason when we don't understand what they're doing or why things are going the way they are. It's not always because, or it's typically not because they're trying to be oppositional to us, or sometimes they are manipulative. Let's be honest, we all are. But it's really recognizing that they are people and they have a need. And how can we be helpful to bring that about? And that's why I brought it. So as I'm talking, Christina, what is it about this? What provokes you? And when I read that poem?
It reminds me that they aren't the label that we assign them. It makes me think that, they are more than just what their diagnosis says they are.
Exactly. And I totally agree. And I want to say that as I'm asking Christina questions, this is a great time. I'm always inviting you as my audience to participate. We're not in a room where it's like, oh, I see your hand raised, but please feel free to add chats when we're talking, because there's going to be times just that kind of adds extra flavor to the to what I have prepared, that if we can know what you've been thinking or what you have walked through. I would say, I know you probably have heard this if you haven't known anything about autism. They say if you know one person who has autism, you've known one person with autism. And I would say that is true. And that's a celebration of life. It's just like there's only one of me and there's only one of you. Let's see. So I want to begin with, and this again is something I would say I could use with an adolescent, because I feel like I asked Christina about a month ago when I was preparing this training. I said, how many of your clients that that are on the spectrum, how many of them actually have a clue, or like could understand like why they behave the way they do, or understand what autism really means? And I think you said one person, maybe, like that was. And I want to say, I feel like sometimes we say these words, we tell people them, and we don't really, and sometimes parents don't really even know, guardians, caregivers don't really know what it is, and they don't really express it. It's not an everyday conversation. It's like, oh, the reason you had struggled now is because you were sensory overload, or etc. So I wanted to start with, what is autism? What is the straight talk about you and your autism? So there's a growing up is hard, and an autistic individual, that's a challenge. So there are more obstacles growing up with autism, and there are often there's sensory issues. Society doesn't always know what to do with you. Christina, what have you experienced? What would you say about why is it different, or where the difficulty is?
I feel like a lot of the difficulty lies in just knowing when. So they're gonna, they're overstimulated by what, and trying to figure out through their childhood and their adulthood is what are they overstimulating? What is causing the behaviors? I think that's probably the most difficult and the most different thing when you're diagnosed with autism.
I agree. I feel like, especially if the person is more independent, is verbal, that and can look like there isn't any struggle or disability, then that can look like that society just interprets that there is why is there a problem here? This problem has to be that you're lazy, or this or that, just more negative things. It's not usually we think, oh, I wonder if they have if they're autistic, if there is really something else going on there. So And I call them my now people. And this is just my phrase, because what I've noticed about those who are neurodiverse is that they're really present focused. And what I mean by that is, it's not that they don't have any memories of the past or they can't ever think about tomorrow. It's really that they're more present, and they really almost like don't have the capacity really to self-reflect the past. I would say that's why as a therapist, I typically do not want to see a individual, especially a child, without somebody else's input, because, I mean, typically, in a typical session, like that would be normal for across the board, would be that somebody would, a child would come in with a parent, and the parent would say, well, Johnny, last week he did this and that. And Johnny's like, that was so last week. Why are you bringing this up? And that can sound like, again, like, well, what is wrong? I mean, like, why isn't Johnny, what is up with Johnny? He just needs to get together. But honestly, it's really part of their neurological makeup, that they don't really think about, they don't self-reflect. If it happens right then, you're there, that's different. But if it's in the past, sometimes they can reflect, and that helps us interpret how they are focusing and how they're in the present moment, and that's helps kind of move forward. When I first started working in the field, I was doing in-home counseling, which actually really gave me that observation, because if I was present and there was a problem, I was able to help them through it. And that's why I'm part of what I like to do, and what Christina does as well as therapists, is that we work to coach the parents and to know what to do and problem solving with them, as much as we talk to the child or the adult. Because I actually, even with my adult clients, I do have often have parents who are there to support, because they know how, where the pattern has been, and they can explain that a little bit better. And of course, with adults, I am getting that release, obviously, to talk to them. So it's also about how sometimes it can be hard to figure out what's going on in the world, in conversations, the world around us. So this is how I like to think about it. Their world, when you think of just where you are right now and how you feel, like if you look in your room right now, like where you are sitting, you see your room, your world around you, you are listening to me, and that's the conversation, and you are feeling things inside your body. That's the fancy word is, that's the interperception, and that you're feeling things inside. So like if you had if you're thirsty, you feel that, you feel like if your tummy is full because you had breakfast, or if you didn't, that's what you feel. And then what is going inside their head in terms of like the thoughts and the feelings that come around. Often those who have autism typically have difficulty understanding. And I would say, sometimes part of our therapy is helping them connect what's happening in their body to their mind, to understand, when I have a tummy ache, when I start to feel that, what's going on in what do you feel? I feel, oh, my stomach is hurting, or I feel some kind of I feel like something in my chest or my back or something. That helps them to know, oh, when I feel that way, I'm starting to feel anxious, because it's not a normal, they feel more disconnect than I would say a neurotypical person would. And those behaviors that can, if there's all these things that are going on that are difficult, they can lead to there being difficulty to know how to explain what's going on and where my distress is or what I need. That when the voice, it seems, when I would say, when there's distress, it causes the mouth to shut down, and it's difficult for the language to come out and say, I need this. I don't like that. I'm cold. You told me you were going to go we were going to go here before there. You told me you were going to go home. Whatever it is, it can just kind of shut down what's going on in here to get it out. And instead, that's often where there is acting out. And even if it's not really throwing things or screaming, it can be that I'm going to withdraw and I'm not going to be present and I'm going to be scared. And you can see there's definitely stress. So this is one of my favorite. I mean, if you were here another time, you would have seen this. And this is, I call it my happy video, because it's just, so I'll let you see it, and it just really kind of explains it. And I think it's great for adolescents, and kids, and even the kids who don't have children who have no people who are autistic, so that it helps them as well.
We are all different, and that's wonderful. Some differences are easy to see: height, hairstyle, gender, eye color, and so on. Other differences can't be seen: our favorite foods, fears, or special skills. Interestingly, the way we see the world is also different. For instance, what do you see in this drawing? Most people see a duck, but some of you might have seen a rabbit. Whichever you saw, you are correct. This is just a trick drawing to show you that all brains work differently. The brain is your body's computer. It works differently for all of us and controls how you learn. That's why we are all good at different things. How you feel, which is why we all feel different emotions. And how you communicate. Sometimes the brain is connected in such a way it affects the senses and how we perceive and read situations and interactions. This is known as autism. Many people have autism, so it's likely you already know someone who is autistic. And for this reason, it's useful to know a little bit about autism. The special wiring inside an autistic brain can sometimes make the person good at tasks we may find difficult, such as mathematics, drawing, or music. It can also do the opposite, and activities we find too easy are incredibly difficult to them, such as making friends. The senses constantly send information to your brain about your surroundings and other people. However, when a person's brain and its senses don't communicate well, the brain can become overwhelmed and confused, affecting how they see the world. Picture yourself walking down the street. This is how an autistic brain may experience the same world. Scary, isn't it? Sadly, in many cases, the person can't say out loud how they feel. So even though there's chaos going on in their heads, they seem okay on the outside, unable to ask for help. We will develop behaviors to help us feel calm in uncomfortable situations. We may look away, hug ourselves, chew our fingernails, fidget, bite our lips, and so on. Equally, autistic people develop behaviors that help them cope with these intense moments. These actions may seem unusual, but they're just their way to feel calm. When they happen, it means they are having a hard time. The kind thing to do is not to give them an even harder time by getting cross, ignoring them, or mocking them. People with autism need friends who are willing to take the time to know them. With good communication and plenty of patience, everyone would be better off. People with autism are not ill or broken. They simply have a unique view of the world. And with a little support from their friends, they might just be able to share that view with us. Autism can make amazing things happen.
So I'm not sure. He usually likes to skip. Nope, that's right. Okay, sorry. Yeah, every time I listen, it does give me a tenderness because these are precious people, and we want to celebrate them. And that's part of what we're doing here, is having a vision to help them recognize that they are a gift to the world, and how do we help them to become productive and can enjoy their lives as adults by different things. So back to the regularly scheduled program. So sensory processing, I mentioned a little bit when I was talking about Kim. Again, we'll have more of that probably planning in this winter time. We'll have a training more about it. But sensory processing, I believe, is such a big deal with autism, and I don't know that a lot of people focus on that or are aware. I'm excited that that I'm actually Christine and I are like developing a little one of the treatment rooms at Harborview. We're trying to get into to make it more sensory sensitive and be aware of those issues, because sometimes things that we don't, we might not like it. We might like overhead lights, but I don't respond the same way as somebody who is autistic. So it's important to kind of be aware of that. So we have a lot of senses, and actually, when we were children, we learned like, well, there's our 5. But when we went to the autism training, I think that the lady who taught on this said there was 21. Well, that can blow your mind. But I mean, some of the ones that you may not be aware of course, I'm not going to mention eyes and ears and all that, because you know about that. But there is that, what I used earlier, like interoception, which is the understanding, the sensing of your own body. Understanding proprioception, which is the understanding of your body in space, which again, for us who don't have these issues, it's like, that's like no big deal. But it really is a big deal. It really neurologically affects how the midline, how much I can do, how much I'm really able to exercise or have coordination or really manage my world. Sensory integration is the brain's ability to process all the feedback that's going on in the world, just like the video just said. Those who have autism often have sensory processing issues, and they can all be different. And so they can either be overstimulated or understimulated, and certain things can be difficult. When I was talking to Kim a few months ago, it was so much fun. We had so much fun talking. One of the things that she shared is that she can have like almost a catatonic state. Well, it's called autistic catatonia. And when she is in Walmart, and because there's just so much going on stimulation wise with the lights, the people, and the sounds, that literally her body shuts down. So that's the overstimulation. Not everybody's like that, but they do tend to struggle with that issue. So it's really important to recognize that these are, a situation they can get overloaded easier. Actually, having a disorder itself, I mean, all autistic individuals can have, or any neurodivergent individuals can have a sensory issues, but a sensory processing disorder is not something that's diagnosed by myself as a therapist. It's diagnosed by an occupational therapist. But at the same time, we can be aware of things and ask questions about those things. A sensory diet can also make a difference. So some of those things we'll talk about, and that can be just things like space and time, weighted blanket. There's activities. There's a whole bunch of activities that can be done to help calm and strengthen a person. And that's really important as an individual to understand what your sensory needs are. And for a person, and that's how I would describe it to, and I have described it to my clients. And I have this give space. Okay, so this is one of the areas that is important to recognize. So there is a need for space, and to recognize that we often are, I would almost want to say, like, we live in a world that's going 70 miles an hour, and those who have autism, sometimes that's exhausting. And when they can do it, they can't do it as long as most people, and then they need time to be alone. So the space isn't like, and you think about it as a teenager, every teenager needs more space to be alone. There's something about what's going on in the brain, because a whole bunch going on in the brain as an adolescent, that the brain needs time. That's why they sleep more, and they usually spend more time like in their room or alone. It's not always because they're isolating and they're, and sometimes they are, but a lot of times it's just that way the brain needs to processes things and needs that space. But this is different. This is like a lifelong thing of teaching them how they need how do we incorporate space, even if that means sitting in the car for 5 minutes before they go into a place, understanding that their body is kind of like getting a little or just regulated in that way. Christina, how have you used this or incorporated this in your therapy?
I give my kids in therapy and even my adults the ability to move around the room however they want. So if they want to sit in a chair or they want to sit in the corner by themselves for a little bit, I allow it. Outside of therapy, I've suggested for parents to talk to the schools and see if there's anywhere a kid can go, even if it's in the back of the classroom in the beanbag chair, that allows it. And also with at the house, might not be the bedroom, but it might be sitting on the floor of a closet, because that's more confined to them, and also giving them safe words that when they do know that they need space, that they're able to say it.
Very good. And I think about the need to, sometimes space can just be also when I am struggling. Sometimes adults, especially any adult, doesn't, even if the person, the autistic person is an adult, and sometimes adults can get in their face and say, what is the problem? Why is this happening? And, I don't know. I just know for myself, if I'm frustrated and struggling, I don't have an answer for you right away necessarily. I might be able to tell you, I felt disrespected, or I might be able to tell you something, but sometimes I'm not able to. And I feel like that's usually what people need is space. There's been times when I worked, especially when I was doing in-home, because I was like in the action in the middle of it. I would just see that conflict would happen. And I remember, and sometimes just people need space. I remember taking a client, he was like 6 years old at the time. It was a long time ago. And we were at the library and he just kind of like flipped out a little bit. I mean, he was just a little bit more aggressive, I mean, not in a mean way, but just more, he was very busy, and he just had, I don't know if he even said anything, it's been so long, but what he did is he crawled underneath the, there was like those, those little tables they have in the library for children. And he just crawled under there. And one of the ladies said to me, so is he okay? Do we need to do something? I said, no, he's going to be okay. And he just needed a few minutes. He was overstimulated. He just went under there. He calmed down within like 5 minutes, and life went on, and he had a great day. And so part of it was, but sometimes as adults, because we want to know, we want to get into it, that we ask, and we do this to a lot of people, and it's like sometimes actually everybody can use a 5-minute break, but especially those who have autism, that can be a challenge, and they just need it, and they won't always know it. So, and sometimes just coming home and just having 10 minutes to just be, and not allowing overly stimulated things happening can be a way of like, almost like I like to say, defragging the brain. Okay. And so like, as I turn, when you're talking to an adolescent, it's important to recognize those who have autism, they're unique. And I would say most those who are on the spectrum typically have something that they're good at, or something that they're like, that we would call their special interest. I don't like the word obsession, because I feel like that makes it sound negative, like they don't have OCD. Now, it's not that not that an autistic person could have OCD, but that's separate. That's a different issue. But everyone that I've known who, who's on the autism spectrum, they have an interest. Sometimes it changes, sometimes it doesn't. And these are questions that you can ask them, like, and I do ask them. And so they be, what are you good at? What do you get? Because if you're asking them, so if you have shared interest, if you have an interest in what they're interested in, you'll get a lot out of that. They'll be able to share with them. Are you more in some, like everybody, are you more, do you like school? Do you like work in school? Like, you like math? Do you like certain things at school that are fun? That you like the academic? Or do you learn better with hands-on? It's important because sometimes we live in a world that you have to check the boxes when it comes to education. And it's important to recognize that, well, for everybody, that it's really not that simple. I mean, just because I can pass my classes doesn't mean that I'm a better learner by seeing things, taking things apart, doing things. That's how I learn. And it's, again, do you enjoy people? I had a friend recently ask me, or say, she really thought that all autistic people were kind of like introverts. And I would say, no, that's not been my experience. I have some that are like, they really don't have any interest in that much into people. But they would like a couple friends. And I have some that are which would much more like engaging, would love to have been involved in theater. Actually, in the world, there are people that if I named their names, you would know that they you'd be surprised that they have autism. So like that's because sometimes the funny thing about, just a little extra, when it comes to the theater, why do people in the theater, why would you think autism? That sounds kind of weird to like it. It's really because it's really, these social interactions are really challenging. But when you're actually in the theater, they tell you what to say. So sometimes they know how to do that and play that, put on a role much easier than it is to deal with real life. And it's asking, and that's a yes or no question. What do you want to do? So it's sometimes their dreams, kind of knowing. I ask because that's the beginning part. Every child, most children have this idea of like, what I'm going to be when I grow up, or what do I like, or, oh, that looks like fun. Some of them are realistic, some of them are not, but we all start somewhere. And that's a good, important thing to kind of recognize. And what helps you when you have a stressful day? Now, we might, sometimes we think of things because that's the things we do, but sometimes asking. Now, the thing about, I will also, when you ask what helps, that's probably more of an adult way of saying it. I probably would say, what makes you smile? If people say, I don't know. And I say, well, do you do this, this, and this? Because those who have autism typically are more focused and they have a hard time with the general questions. So when I get a question like, I don't know, it is a cue for me to say, oh, I need to be more specific and ask, do you like playing video games? Do you take walks, or do you do anything? Is there any exercise you like to do, or do you paint, or anything like? I ask more specific questions. And what makes you laugh? I have this thing, even with, it's my belief about trauma as well. But I feel like, in general, when your brain is rigid, it's important to try to bring humor in. Now, that doesn't mean sarcasm where I'm putting people down, but learning to teach them a little bit of being silly together is helpful to help them feel like they're, just that that it's okay, that life is okay. And I feel like, I feel like neurologically that we're creating new neural pathways when we laugh together, we are silly together, which I'm pretty decent at having fun. Okay. Yes, there are challenges in being neurodiverse, but they have strengths. And I just so want to celebrate that. And every client that I have right now, or have had in the last year, if I was to think of them, I could tell you what they're good at. And I try to get excited. I do get excited with them. I want them to celebrate, whether they're doing that as their job. I have one adult client who, it's not really what he's doing as a job, but he is a researcher. So when he gets something new, if he wants something, that he needs, he does extensive research. He doesn't really always understand why other people don't want the things that he wants, because he has an interest in getting the right thing in a way that's, unique to him. And I always celebrate that with him, because I find that very, if I needed someone to be researching products, he's the man I'd want to hire, because he has a clue in that. And he's very good at getting into the details and focusing on that. So other things that we're doing is, I feel like when it comes to autism, I would say anxiety is the biggest issue, like emotionally, that they process with. And typically that is because of those who have autism need to predict the future. It's like when they understand, like they do the best, like it says here, is like they do best in routine. If they know that they have routine, then that helps them to kind of know, oh, I'm going to school today. I got, this is what's going to happen. When they don't know what's going to happen, it makes a difference. So part of that is like emotionally helping them, and as an adolescent, it can be that they can do some scheduling themselves, things that don't have anything to do with, like, is already scheduled. It can help them to recognize being consistent in things, that we always do things like this can be helpful. It doesn't mean there can't be flexibility, because we need that flexibility too. Using a calendar, I think that, once kids are at they can understand the concept of a calendar, even if they can't super read, it's really important to kind of teach them, like, so that they can go and say, oh, let's see what tomorrow is like. Oh, Wednesday means today is Thursday. We're going to be doing these things after school. That they can look at that, so they can be autonomous and actually look at the calendar, not always say, Mom, what are we doing? Or I want to do this or whatever. They have the ability to do that. And that really can, it promotes autonomy. It promotes them to learning to do it. Sometimes, that because they're learning to have that, they own it, as opposed to it's being outside of themselves, where someone just says, well, we're going here. I don't know what your mom was like when you were a child, but there were times when mom would just say, or dad would say, we're going to go in 5 minutes. And it wasn't necessarily that sometimes they might say, oh, we're going to the grocery store, or we're going to go get the car, or whatever, we're going to do something. But sometimes they would just say, get ready, get your shoes on. And they wouldn't tell me what we were going to do. Now, I might not have liked that, but I could tolerate that. But when autistic individuals, really, that's a challenge. There's a need to anticipate that we're going to go for a ride and we're going to go to these 3 stores. Now that can sound like, well, I'm the parent, I should be able to say, get in the car and shut up, and not that, like, just that I'm in charge. But I would just say that you can say that, but you'll get more mileage. You're encouraging anxiety in an autistic individual if you don't. You can just say, we're planning to go to the store. And I would even say that, even like, especially like stores like Walmart, if we're going to Walmart, all of you been to Walmart, how big it is. So like, if I have someone who has autism with me, I would say, and I did this with my clients when I would say, we're going to the store, and like, we're getting a snack, or we're going to get some art supplies. I would tell them what we're doing. Or I'd say, oh, obviously with my clients, I wasn't going grocery shopping, but if that was my child, I would say, well, we're going grocery shopping, or all I'm doing is picking up some ground meat for hamburgers tonight. I would say it because that helps them to anticipate. It helps them to know, well, this is how long it's going to take us. It helps their mind know, oh, these are the things why we're going there, as opposed to the big blanket store. That can cause a lot of anxiety, because you've been to Walmart. You could be there and get out in maybe 10 minutes because all you're going there is for, some Halloween candy. Or you could be there for an hour because, wow, you notice this sale, and then you really need some milk, and then all of a sudden you wander around, which is what Walmart tries to get you to do. So but as much as there's communication of, like, so they can anticipate, can make a big difference. So I like to say, what is in your toolbox? How can we help you? So again, there are things that kids do, and you will talk, some of these we'll talk more in a time, and where we already have. So like, again, I like to think of it as these are ready-made things. What helps them to decompress, which is the stemming, which is really different activities that they do, which can be like, even like as I'm clapping my hands, it can be that they need to make noises, and they different movements in their body. It can be things that they enjoy. That's where things like fidgets and stuff like that can be helpful. This is my this one hangs in my wall. Sometimes I just go like this. Now, does that mean I have autism? No, it just means it's kind of fun, but it does mean that sometimes having something, this is an interesting feel. It's kind of like jelly-ish, it's like squishy. And so sometimes these feelings can do things. Sometimes I encourage, what's in the toolbox. We'll talk about this more later. Do you have these little things, back in the day before COVID, we go to these vendor fairs and we get stuff like this. So that's where I've got a lot of these things from. And even stuff like having, like little toys. This is actually a salt and pepper shaker, but like having little things that they can put in their pocket. Those little things can be something that they can tangibly texture, can be grounding and be helpful. It's important to encourage their special interests. This is also important, like, so if they have some things that it can be helpful just to help them that way. Is there anything, Christine, that you've put in your kids have put in their toolbox?
A lot of them do use the fidget toys. That's the most thing, is fidget toys, honestly, or Play-Doh. They love Play-Doh, so that they can just mess with it and put it back and keep going.
then it helps them to kind of focus, and that's great. So I'm saying this to you, some of these things I may have said to you before, and if you've been to my other trainings, but it is important. And what I'm saying here is that as the children get older, when they're 5, they may not have that concept, but as they're in the second decade of their life, it's important to actually encourage them. What do they need? If you're going on an outing, or when they come home, what do you need right now? Part of that is like that verbalization of what do you need? Because I want them to start to say it, to own it, because that's how we grow, as opposed to somebody else guessing. And the more they understand their body, then they can do that. They can understand it. I'm not saying it's easy right away, but in time they will. So sensory overload. Now, we've been talking about senses for a while. And these are some of the things that I've noticed in sensory overload that you can see. So if you observe someone who is like this is something to kind of notice. It's, again, some of them are verbal and like obviously big, big picture, like some can be smaller, just being irritable, but needing to go away, needing to have hide, holding their hands over their ears, and can't learn or can't calm down. Christina, what have you experienced with your clients when it comes to sensory? Does anyone else have any sensory overload feedback?
I know with my clients, there's a lot of verbal lashing out. They have so much they say, and they've held it in for so long that they just let it all out at one time because that's their opportune time. And then I have a lot that get very irritable when they are overloaded, and so we just have to de-escalate the irritability.
Yeah, I would say for myself, I think I've noticed, those, as well as like when I'm in a setting that's over, I just think of, truly, I just told one of my clients a few weeks ago. I went into Kohl's, and Kohl's now has Sephora, and Sephora, is that makeup place. And if you haven't ever been to Sephora or seen it even in the mall, it is like interrogation bright. It is so bright in there. I mean, I remember, because I'm so dorky sometimes, I go in this, I was in here and I was like, I want to say, you're not going to get any autistic individuals coming in this section. That, like, this would be so difficult. It was difficult for me. And I mean, and it was just really bright. So I just felt like, I'm aware of that. So sometimes being aware when there's too much noise. Christina experiences, I've told clients this, where I've told them, I have sensitive ears. And if ears hurt, if my ears are, if things are too loud, if I like to carry earplugs, I don't always remember to, but if they're too loud, my neck will start to hurt. It was like all my muscles were just, so I mean, I understand that I'm sensitive, and I think that, so I think of that for my clients, those who, when there's loud, tall ceilings in places like the cafeteria, a gymnasium, or a certain kind of stores, like I think of Lowe's, because it's different than Walmart. They're tall ceilings, but it doesn't absorb as well as the sound, like maybe Walmart does, because it does have different kinds of material in it. But when those things are happening, it's important for teenagers to know that about themselves. As I don't like noise, I don't carry them. And they carry headset, or they carry something that says I have earplugs, or something that helps, because the sound is too much, and it's kind of annoying. And I know that it's hard to learn when someone is overloaded and they just need a moment. Just like I told you about the little boy, he did it himself. I didn't tell him going to the cup. Of course, I wouldn't tell him to go over there, but he just knew I needed to shut down for a second, and then he was fine again. So I feel like that sometimes we need to recognize when you see these behaviors, is to kind of recognize, is this a sensory overload? And I would say that it's just important to give them a moment to say, I think this is what you're experiencing. And you using the words, I think that you need some space. And so going out to the car for 5 minutes, doing something a little different, if it's an adult and they're working, if they can, just go use the restroom for a minute, can be a way of kind of like, it's, a different, a smaller space, or going outside, it's kind of helping them problem solve how to do that. So I kind of went to, I guess this is a section. So this is how you, when someone notices if you notice that there's sensory overload, this is what you can do, is first be kind to yourself. Sometimes when we struggle with our weaknesses, we are so mean to ourselves. We're like, I'm such a loser. And I feel like I wish I was able to do everything. Well, but that's not helpful. So teaching people to be kind to themselves is very helpful. It's like, it's okay to take care of yourself. Just like if you couldn't stand too long, or somebody struggled with, they had to have a snack because they have diabetes, we're not, we don't like, oh, that's terrible. But sometimes when it comes to these kind of things, it's easy to be mean to yourself. So that would be a place I would start. And then, and also being aware what's going on in the body. How is the body responding? When I go through this, when I'm starting to feel this way, I know I need to get like some space. Finding a space, and then we'll talk a minute about what a go bag is, and we're just carrying things that are going to help to kind of bring settling down, and learning to breathe deep. Sometimes I feel like people think we talk about breathing deep too much, but when people are anxious, and you all know this, when you're anxious, you're breathing from up here. And you're not even, I know when I'm that way, I don't necessarily realize it. So it's important to teach it, to say, and sometimes if you're the person working with them and they're struggling, sometimes it's not you saying, deep breathe, come on, let's give me one. It's really your cadence. The more you're calmer, watching your cadence and how you talk in a rhythm, you're going to be okay. When I'm talking like this, I'm talking in compassion. I'm talking like it's going to be okay. And that's how I say it. When I just told somebody yesterday, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And sometimes that's what people need to see, is that they need to tell themselves, which is a way to self-talk. And they can have, those are things that they can also be working on as well, is, because we all need a break. We all need to know when we need limits. So this is Purple Ella, and she's autistic and has she is an adult that learned of her autism when she was, I believe, like in her late 30s or 40s. And she's real good at explaining this. And I think that this will encapsulate a lot of things we've just talked about.
When I was first diagnosed and I started to learn to manage how to meet my goals and how to meet my needs as someone with autism and ADHD, I learned that I could benefit from implementing a daily routine. There are lots of benefits to a routine. It helped me to feel less anxious in the mornings because I knew what to expect from the day. It's easier to...
Sorry. Wait, sorry about that. I was trying to...
When I was first diagnosed and I started to learn to manage how to meet my goals and how to meet my needs as someone with autism and ADHD, I learned that I could benefit from implementing a daily routine. There are lots of benefits to a routine. It helped me to feel less anxious in the mornings because I knew what to expect from the day. It's easier to incorporate healthy habits like journaling and exercise if those things just become part of a daily routine. And overall, life just felt less overwhelming. But equally, when I tried to put one into practice in the long term, I learned that trying to adhere to a routine also created some new problems. I noticed that I felt anxious and overwhelmed if something changed and I had to switch from my daily routine to an unexpected situation, which made the routine a little bit counterproductive. It also felt difficult to feel that I was clock watching all day to make sure that I stuck to my routine. And as an ADHDer, I found that after a few days of the routine, I became restless and agitated because of having to stick to doing the same thing at the same time every day. So I'd try shifting to a different routine, but after a few days of that, the same thing would happen. So the problem wasn't with any particular routine, but in fact with the notion of a daily routine. This was frustrating, to recognise that something was potentially good for me in order to stay regulated and organised, but equally to notice that actually sticking to it didn't seem realistic or achievable. And this is when I started experimenting with mini routines and rhythms. which I found much more helpful. So in this video, I'm going to share the why and the how to develop a rhythm and mini routines as a part of your day. Using mini routines and rhythms gives me a sense of comfort and control in what can feel like a very chaotic world, but with the flexibility of not having to adhere to a strictly time-based routine. The system follows a pattern of events rather than a clock, and they give me flexibility each day to find the right pace and rhythm for any particular day, dependent on my energy levels and my motivation and what I want to achieve. For example, if I've had a bad night's sleep and I'm feeling tired and slow, then I can adjust my rhythm and routines to have a slower day and accommodate my needs. It also allows for spontaneity, which will help people with ADHD, but with a level of structure that will prevent us from getting carried away with dopamine seeking. Your rhythm is the pace at which you want your life to run. I need a slower pace to my day because otherwise I end up feeling overwhelmed, overstimulated and unregulated. And that can cause me to be irritable with the people around me, which is not good. Additionally, as someone who also has physical disabilities, if I don't commit to a slower rhythm, then I can end up overdoing it, making my symptoms worse, and ultimately, potentially, crashing. It's too easy to fall into a bust and boom cycle, which is where you do all the things when you have the energy, only to crash and be unable to do anything, rest, regain energy, and repeat that cycle. I think it's much more satisfying to stick to a slower rhythm and be able to be much more consistent. The starting point for my daily rhythm are my two bookend routines. The two routines which signal the start and the end of the day. My morning and evening routines. These are a great way to start constructing your daily rhythm. They aren't placed at a particular time of day, rather they're signalled by a particular event. So my morning routine begins when I wake up and get out of bed. As a starting point for creating your bookend routines, you might want to sit down and write down all the things that you need to include in each of those routines. I would caution against including too much though, especially as you are getting started with this. For example, my morning routine includes exercising, breakfast, journaling, planning for my day, and getting up, dressed and washed. And my evening routine includes personal hygiene for the end of the day, making a relaxing cup of tea and getting into my pajamas, which happens after dinner every day. Once you have your bookend routines sorted, then you can begin to plan for your daily rhythm through the day and potentially a couple more mini routines to include. Next, I consider anchor points for my day, and then I can assign blocks of time which are routed between these anchor points. I have 4 anchor points. Ready to start the day, which is right after my morning routine, lunchtime, finishing the working day, and after dinner. At the weekend, I only have 3 because I'm generally not working. These anchor points naturally then give me 4 blocks of time. 1 between breakfast and lunch, 1 between lunch and ending the working day, 1 between ending the working day and dinner, and 1 from dinner till bedtime. All of these time blocks can be used flexibly. For example, if you start your morning routine late, then you can either have a shorter time block before lunch, or you can have lunch late if you need to extend the time block. Or if something came up unexpectedly in the afternoon, then you could easily get back to your rhythm by attaching yourself to the next anchor point that comes up after the disruption. Another tip to this structure is that if you're someone who needs to assign rest periods throughout the day, but like me, you can't actually implement them because you keep forgetting or getting carried away, then you can attach rest breaks to your anchor points. I have a mini routine of getting rest after my lunch every day. You can create as many mini routines as you like, possibly a doing your special interest routine or a doing the laundry routine. All you need to include are the logical sequence of events that you will do in order to complete that task. To start filling these time blocks, I found it helpful to sit down and write down all the things that I'm hoping to achieve each week. And then you can assign particular tasks to particular days. And this is where you can start to be more or less structured depending on your preference. Personally, this is where I stop being structured. And instead, I have a plan for what I need to do each day, but I sit down in the morning with my planning book and plan when and how I'm actually going to get those things done on a daily basis. This means that if I have appointments, then I can work my tasks around those. Or if I'm having a particularly difficult day or a flare day, then I can reduce the number of tasks I'm aiming to do and either assign them to another day or accept that they're not happening this week. Or you might prefer to actually assign tasks to particular blocks of time in advance. So perhaps you always do the laundry on a Monday morning, or you always do your out of the house chores on a Wednesday afternoon. I'd only recommend this approach if you're way more laid back than me and you can cope with not doing what you were supposed to be doing on a Monday morning because the cat needed to go to the vets. If you do choose to do it this way, make sure you leave some time blocks available for rest, for fun, and for unexpected or ad hoc tasks. Okay, so that's basically it. Just a shorter recap in case I used way too many words. First, plan your bookend routines, a morning routine and an evening routine. Next, establish anchor points to structure your day, potentially based around meal times or if you work, the start of work and the end of work. Finally, plan what tasks you need to get done each week and either add them into your structured time blocks or plan when you're going to do them on the day. I've created a document with my daily rhythm, my bookend routines, my tasks each week and my tasks each day. And I'm going to use this as a way to start to get used to the rhythm and the routine. Eventually, it'll probably just come naturally. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe.
I really like this one. I feel like it really, it's doable because you can start with small chunks. And I realize that sometimes the anxiety, sometimes of knowing what to do next is often the challenge that especially with the adult clients. So it's kind of like, oh my goodness, can I just get it to go to the next? Okay. Yay, a break. So right now we're just going to take a 10-minute break. And so we'll be back. What time is it now? So I'll say we'll be back at 20 after, just to give it, I like round even numbers. If you have any questions about the information we just went over, this would be a great time to put it in there. That way we can kind of maybe go through it about the stuff we just talked about. Okay, I'll see you in a few minutes. Bye-bye. All right, let me put the PowerPoint back on. There we go. Okay. So now we're moving on. Oh, you what? Just behave. Okay. So as we move on, we're talking about what is having realistic expectations. I think we started talking about this because sometimes our clients can have unrealistic expectations about what life is really like and having realistic goals. So that's part of challenging them as the people in their lives to help them to kind of make good steps in that way. Oh, I didn't realize practical. So this section we're really talking about practical steps. It's not like that people can do very concretely to make some changes. So the first thing is a go bag. Now I did mention that a little bit earlier. I mean, here I have a bag because this is the bag I chose, but for a lady, it could be, a tote bag, or it's whatever anybody wants, but really it's about preparing for a success. It's a bag that goes with you. It can have things like fidgets or other sensory items. It could have a wetted blanket or vest if that's needed, especially if a person, that's how they calm down. Music, essential oils that can calm, noise cancellation headset, a snack and water, hand sanitizers, identification. It could have and it could be anything. Like with one of my adult clients, this is something he's done on his own, and his bag is very thorough. And part of it is that he doesn't like plastic cutlery. So he carries with him a really nice set of knife, fork, and spoon, because that is what he needs, and that's what's important to him. So as you can see, it's not like just the normal things. I'll say normal, like what you would maybe think of. It's whatever helps a person become successful. And so I would say that's where, it can be anything that you can think of. And it's just important to kind of see that if someone as a person ages, Is there, if they're in their adolescent years, if this is something you want them to own, what is helpful to you when you are stressed out? Maybe they need a snack, but it shouldn't be probably a bunch of sugar. But at the same time, them picking out a snack or knowing what they need or knowing that everything is gathered together at that point. And sometimes they may have a smaller one. I was actually expressing this to one of my adult clients, and she said that this would be too much for her. This actually caused her anxiety thinking of having so many things. But at the same time, she said, well, but I can put in my purse of the essential, the most important things that I need. And I think that's true. I mean, if you have a car, you can keep some of these things in the car. And it doesn't have to be everything that you carry. But sometimes with people, from the client who needs the fork and spoon with him, I think that his anxiety is reduced because he's able to, because he has it with him. He feels like every need is what he has is met, and that if he has a problem, he can take care of it. And I think that's the main thing, is that the anticipation of issues reduce and kind of problem solving the best you can helps reduce stress. So it's something to consider for those, and to start this discussion, because it can make a difference in how somebody actually, can be successful in the, outside of their home in that way. Christina, do you have any clients that have a go bag?
I do. I think I have one client that has a go bag.
And how do they use that? How is it helpful?
It allows them to have what they need when they're out, so they don't have to, if something arises while the family is out, they don't have to go back home. They already have the tools and the essentials to keep calm or to help reduce anxiety and stress.
Oh, that's good. So part of that can be, and I just wanted to, I mentioned the word identification. It's another area that can be just practical, is to have that the person would have an ID, some kind of thing that says their name on it. But I also think it's important that if they could make a card, I think that you can go on a web, if you look on the web, there's probably cards that are easily made, but it's important to it doesn't have to be fancy. It's just something that it can say that this person has I have autism. Sometimes when I'm stressed, I don't know how to handle, these are things, these are people who can be contacted if there's an emergency. Like I mentioned earlier with Kim, Clary, that, if she had that catatonic experience in public places, they might not know what to do with her, but if she had something that was kind of easily seen, it would be helpful so that people would know, okay, she's going to be okay. She's not like having some medical emergency, as much as that she probably just needs space, just needs a moment, she'll be okay. And that's just really important, because sometimes when people are distressed in general, but especially autistic people, when there's distress, this verbal ability to speak, it's not available as much as we would wish they was. So if it's written down and prepared, that can be very helpful to help somebody do it. And it's also taking ownership, that I have something in my pocket, that I have something that I'm carrying in my bag that says that, so that, and I've heard recently, like even where they've done this kind of identification card on a person's, and a child's, child carrier, not carrier, but for lack of a better word, carrier, that is in the car seat. They would have that on there, because if there was, in case of an accident, and if say the parent, is unconscious or something, they can be there. This child is, nonverbal, or there could be something in front of there, so that it would be information clearly on there, because the child isn't going to be able to express it. So sometimes it's really good and important to kind of see, like, it's kind of anticipating any kind of stressful situations. So
Karen, we did have two things in the chat about the go bags. Sorry, my chat's being here. Okay, the first one says, I have nieces and nephews that have go bags and they cannot handle it when it's not there with them, and it's been very helpful. And then Christina Richardson asked, what do you do when kiddos refuse to use the go bag sometimes?
Well, I feel like I think of that in two questions, like when they refuse, part of it can be that they're already stimulated too much, that they're like almost like going into shutdown mode. And if someone's with them, it's mostly not arguing like, well, let's find something for you to do. It's more of like, that you're helping them to kind of calm down in that moment, or just to kind of give them the space to say, well, I'm going to give you some space. And, when you're ready, you probably would like to have this. Like if you knew them, like, oh, they probably would like their weighted vest, or they would like, I think you're hungry, or if you, whatever the situation is, you might think, since I think you might enjoy having your fidgets right now. And, but I'm going to give you a minute, and I'm just going to let you kind of, it's okay. You're okay. But when it comes to like, if they don't want to carry it, like, I mean, if you're with somebody, just bring it have it with them. And sometimes, sometimes when people are that way, it's just, and another time when you're not leaving the house, or not going on an air, out in the community, it may be just can be like, well, the other day you really had trouble with that, and maybe there could be a way there could be some talk about it. They may not be able to help. They may not be able to understand, well, I don't like it. I think it's stupid, but they may not, but I would say, well, you like these things. And maybe it could be, you just never know when people are, it can be that they were just angry in general, like it was just that moment. It could be that they hate the bag is ugly. It could be something that has nothing to do with the concept as much as that they don't like what's in the bag. So it can be that, well, let's review it. Are these things are these good things? Should we change it? What is it about it? And so sometimes I would just break it down and ask, but not then, because right then you're just trying to do it. And it's like, well, I'm going to take the bag. So if we were leaving the house right now and, I don't want to take it, like that's stupid. And I mean, then I would just take it. I was just like, you know what, you don't need it, but maybe I do. So I would just kind of put it with myself and say, and maybe we'd even leave it in the car if there's no need for it. And then that would be an easy way to kind of make it, happen later and say, well, maybe we did need it. And if we don't need it, that's great. Sometimes maybe there was a big bag when they were younger, and now it's always good to reevaluate it. And sometimes we just don't always know why somebody's like not okay with something. And sometimes we're just like, please, we just need to go. We're going to be late, and it's really, we need to just ask, hey, what's this? And how can that be different that way? That would be my suggestion. Any other questions?
Nope, that was it.
Cool beans. All right. So here's another thing about where's the struggle. So this is like, we're getting down and dirty about some of the things that are the troubles. So this is important. And I think sometimes self-awareness for adolescents is very challenging in general. And then, so part of it is kind of recognizing, I like to use, so I have this language, and, this is part of why I think I had a vision for wanting to do these trainings today and in December, because I really have this, I want children to be motivated that they're going to become adults, so like are motivated by that. So typically in therapy in general, when I have a child in front of me, like an adolescent, I would say, if they're 12 or 13, I'll say if they're 13 years old, I'll say, you're 5 years away from being an adult. And, one time I did that with a person who's on the autism spectrum, and their parents gave me a look and said, their reaction was like, I just said that their child had cancer. I mean, or was going to get cancer. And I had to say, guess what, regardless of whether you think that that's okay, that they, or you're ready for them to grow up, guess what, they are, they at some point they turned 18, in life moves, that happens. So we want to be prepared. So I always use I call it the grown-up talk, because whenever I say to kids, like, this is what it means to be a grown-up. So chores and responsibilities sometimes are the 4-letter words, the way they can be brought up. But if we are motivating people and children to recognize that what I do the things I do as a grown-up, that's because I'm an adult. When I was 5 years old, my mom and dad took care of these things. I didn't have to. And so now that you're growing up, you have more responsibilities. And so it's different for every person, because that's because sometimes the ability, the executive functioning to be able to like actually remember what they have to do, all those things are there. So I like to be very practical, and sometimes it's like what needs to happen. Sometimes it's not always, they're not always aware, they're not ready to see like this is really important. What does it mean to take care of yourself? So I think of, again, like some of the taking care of my stuff is like what? That you as a grown-up take care of you, nobody, pretty sure no one told you to go take a shower this morning, or that you took, or last night, nobody told you need to brush your teeth, pretty sure, hopefully, that you took care of those things. So as a grown-up, knowing that you're maturing is that you think, oh, it is about, I'm ready to go to bed. I have things I do at night. I make sure I brush my teeth. I do this and that. And that's the same way that's what we're trying to implement with kids. We want them to kind of be thinking, well, what does it mean to be a grown-up? It means, well, does daddy tell mommy you better go take a shower? I mean, no, I mean, unless they're being silly, people don't need, as a grown-up, we're usually pretty good, we internalize that we take care of ourselves, and you want to help them to do that. So, that can be used with charts and different management skills, like sometimes just having a checklist can be helpful. How to keep appointments, how do we know? Again, that's why I mentioned earlier, the calendar, having a big calendar where they can see so on Friday, we have a dentist appointment. So they can anticipate without having to always go to the parent as the central person, but that they can see it themselves. And not that, we're saying, no, we're not going to tell you, you have to go look at the list, but it's almost like you're trying to train them. Let's look at the list together. You're trying to get them to get that. Chores and household management. And that's really, how first you're picking up your stuff. What does it mean? As a grown-up, it's successfully is that, when you're, by the time you're like 18, 20, is that, how you can clean a house. I mean, as boring and as unexciting as that is. And, usually we don't dream about I can't wait to clean the house. It's really important that, we understand how to do those things and semi-successfely. Some of you, there's enough people here that I know some of you, your house is amazingly clean. Your house, you cleaned, you're very structured about how you do it. And it's very important to you, very organized in that way. And then some are not, are still clean, but maybe not as you don't do things as often, etc. So we all have our own style, but it doesn't mean, but we have a rhythm. It's best that we have a rhythm. And that's what you're trying to teach people. I know when I was growing up, you probably all had your own, is that, we did things during the week, and then but Saturday was the clean day, and it was just a part of the routine which I still do a lot of that too. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but but it got me in the rhythm of thinking on Saturday when I have a little more time, I should be doing certain things, and that helps me to be as a grown-up. So if I never was encouraged to do that, if my family didn't make me do that, then it might be harder to implement it. And so it's important to do it. Again, I like to say is that chores are not a 4-letter word. Work is not a 4-letter word. We're all at work, and it's work. And I think sometimes in our society in general is that we kind of look at work as like a 4-letter word. And and we want to encourage people to know, yeah, sometimes we're tired, sometimes we get exhausted. And yet at the same time, there are things in our house that we like to do. It's important that they learn, do they know how to, what is safety? Now, this is all about, every client is different in terms of their ability to be safe in the kitchen. What can they cook, or what can they make for themselves in terms of meals? Now, some of them, like one of my clients, he was going to TCC for culinary arts because he really enjoyed that. And he's actually very good at that. But not everybody is. And so some would be I have others that have issues with their executive functioning. And so it's not safe for them to just have the oven and do make a cake or make a meal and on the stove as easy as we would like them to. So it's important to say what is measured and how can they learn, and how can we make safety in there. And that's because we want them to be adults. We want them to prepare, but everything is inch by inch. It's not I don't know how to do anything, so now go and make us a steak dinner or whatever, or hamburgers, no, it's it takes time, and we teach them, and that's patience. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's not always easy for parents to, they have busy schedules too, but sometimes it's important to kind of say, let's try something new. What would be new? What would be exciting? When it comes to food, I mean, nobody's excited necessarily about vacuuming, but it's important to recognize that these are the things that we do and then sometimes they just need more modeling of it, not just saying, I don't know how many of you you've had parents complain to say, I told Johnny, to go clean his room and he never does it. Well, I just learned about Johnny is, I don't care. a lot of times that's not very helpful, because maturity is that I know it, being mature as an adult, I kind of know what cleaning is, although my style, again, might be different than yours. But as a child, that's not, they don't understand that. So the best way to do it is an example, is to say, you know, when I have parents that say that, I say they need more specific direction. So if you have 4 things, if you've been with me before, I sometimes use my fingers. So if you were cleaning a room and you had 4 things, what would they be? They'd probably be like maybe nothing on the floor, like all the clothes are put where they belong, that your bed is made, and if there's any toys or other things, that you bring your laundry down or something like that. You would pick the things that are the most important, and then you can have it on the wall. You can have it pictures if they're not really they don't have really good English, their reading isn't really isn't up there yet. Or you can just put pictures. But if they can see that they have these 4 things to do or 5 things to do, and they have the categories, they can say, my bed is made. Now, they may not make the bed the way you know, they're not as, I mean, my bed making was terrible when I was 7 years old, but hi, you know, it is better now. I'll just let you know. But so I think that that's really important to kind of recognize, but it's important for them to do it. But sometimes they need skills. They need to be repeatedly taught. Some things are harder to do, and some things are more motivated than others because they're just like us. So, and part of it also is the self-awareness. Sometimes they're not always aware of what they're actually doing and what is actually like frustrating to you. They're not always aware, like I was mentioning, on all of this information, their sensory issues, or that sometimes it bothers them when the certain things bother them. And that's important for them. You know, we're going to help them to figure that out. It doesn't mean that it's all going to happen in one moment. It's just being aware that's an issue that sometimes happens. Okay. So this is about setting realistic goals. And this is, again, taking one step at a time. So I'm going to go through this a little bit, and then I'm going to, Christina has, ask what her experience has been with this. I think sometimes setting goals is very challenging. And I'm not talking about therapeutic goals and all of our stuff, like that kind of thing. I'm talking about for them to sit down and you're saying, what will you do this week? You know, what is a goal to step out in, because you want to have the end. And so I think it's important to ask, so some questions, you know, like, again, like I mentioned, my one client who's he's very research focused. So, you know, ask about, what do you need to have this skill? And sometimes asking family members, you know, who can you talk to about this? You're have an interest in this. And sometimes they need to, you know, it takes a minute to step out, but it's a small step. It doesn't mean you have to, you know, again, I have an interest in being a scientist. Is that like, you know, let's apply to school right now. It's kind of like, well, maybe we need to learn some new things today. Maybe sometimes their goals aren't realistic to really what they really want. So it's taking small baby steps. I mean, that's just really good for any of us. To be open to try new things. Sometimes I want to be something, but I'm not really willing to change. Well, you don't know, that ain't going to happen. You know, you have to really, so it's kind of like in therapy, we're really challenging them to say, well, what would be the next thing? And helping them come up with a thing and saying, well, maybe that's too big a goal. How would you break that big goal into a smaller goal? And sometimes that's, you know, some are more cooperative. I won't say cooperative, they're more ready for it than others. And sometimes it's just like, well, maybe we'll just start with these smaller things. And it's okay to have a timeline, you know, like for them to say, like, for instance, if they're in high school, is that, okay, you have this much time to do this particular thing or learn this. So it's important to kind of, you want to teach that. I think having visualized, part of this is that I'm, you know, made this training. Part of this is something that so it can be used as PowerPoint, these pages, because sometimes it's sitting down with somebody and saying like, well, how do we get your goal? You know, you have a goal for something. Let's see how we can do it, because you want them to learn it. You know, they may not get it as well as you as an adult professional, but I bet you they can get some of it, and they can see things because you want them to generate that. And to kind of recognize, you know, when do I need to ask for help, which I feel like is a big issue, is of difficulty. Christina, what would you add to this? Ask realistic goals.
One of the things I do with my clients is I made up a name. I don't know if it's really what it's called. I call it the sandwich effect. So they have the goal, And then they have what, they know what they want and they know it's the end goal. But how do they get there? So I kind of make them like take it apart like it's a sandwich to understand like we need to get the bread and then we need to put the condiments on it. And then what do we need to get there? I break it down step by step for them so that they understand that they can get to the end game, but how? So this is what the end game looks like. For instance, I had a client who told me that he wanted to earn a 6-figure salary. Now, that was his end game, but he wasn't on step one. So we had to break down, okay, how are we going to get to a 6-figure salary? Are we going to go get a degree? Are we going to get a job, start there, and then get a degree, and then, work on school? And so it kind of breaks it down further for them so that they have a picture of what they want and they have the steps to get there versus this is my goal and this is the end game and no in between.
That's great. I think that when we were talking about the sandwich method, is that part of it is that autistic individuals have difficulty. They do best with pictures, and sometimes giving them an idea of what something looks like. In my therapy, I'm actually doing better or doing more where I am not just being verbal, but sometimes I could pull up the whiteboard, or I show them something like a diagram of something that I have to show them where they're going to go, or anything I'm trying to teach them or speak to them about, because sometimes because they respond more to visual aids than they do to just the verbal. They're usually more visually focused, visually strength than verbally strong. And so with this, this example that Christina has given is that it helps to really break it down to recognize what is needed and how do we change this, or how do we make this actually achievable? And it's not just a sandwich sitting there that just happens. We have to put it together, unless we're going to Subway. But even there, we have to tell them what we want. Okay. So we're going into practical questions. So when I thought of problem solving and questions, I thought, what does problem solving mean? Because, we know what that means because we've been doing this for a little bit. So, but I don't know, a typical 12, 13-year-old would be like, what? They might know the term. They might nod their head. They might not say, what are you talking about? But they might not understand what you're talking about, but they're not going to say it. So I like to say, we need help when we get, when something happens and we get stuck. So everybody needs each other and other information, and we all get stuck. So who is on your team? So part of it is, I feel like sometimes when autistic individuals can be challenged to really think outside of themselves, or to think about the fact that they can be connected to others, to say, hey, I wonder what my therapist knows, or I wonder what my teacher knows about this, or I noticed that, my sister is really good at finance. Maybe I'll ask her. That's not a natural thing that comes to them. I don't think it comes to a lot of teenagers anyways, but it typically is a challenge for those on the autism spectrum. So I like to say, who's on your team? And I think this is a great thing to ask those you're working with, because, parents may be an option, but it's not the only option. Sometimes, you have other family members or neighbors, or, who can you reach out to? Sometimes it is friends, depending on obviously your age or what they have. But all these areas can be questions. So who would you ask when you get stuck? So because sometimes what you're trying to do is teach them to kind of push outside just their own thinking. It's just easy to be, I'll say, just linear, focus on one thing. And I know this is the way it was done before, or I don't know how to do it, so I'm just going to do it the way I did this before. And it's really important to really teach them who is on your team. Am I on your team? How can we help you to kind of look at something? Because everybody has a different perspective. You're teaching them ways to look at things differently. And it doesn't come easy. This is not an easy thing. But at the same time, I continue to encourage that, because that's how problem solving happens. And all of you have probably had that experience where where you have a problem, and you're thinking you're thinking of maybe one or two ways, but you're not happy with those ways. But somehow you ask somebody else. It could be, somebody in your family, a friend. It could be a coworker, your supervisor, and all of a sudden but somebody comes up with it like, well, have you considered this? And you're like, that is like awesome. Why didn't I think of that? And you're just happy. But that's what teams are about. And so it's important to kind of challenge that. I think it is challenging. I think Christina would say it's challenging. What would you say, Christina?
I agree. I think it's challenging for them to know who to ask outside of their box. Whenever we have a problem, I do ask my clients, who are you going to ask? Who's your safe person? Who can you go to? And I let them know that they can ask me these questions, but I don't always have the answers. So maybe someone, mom and dad, maybe teachers, who knows? But they're very challenged on who to go to versus, just keeping it to themselves.
And you're not always around. So it's important you want them to kind of recognize that there are people who can you do. And it's kind of, it can be broken down as to, your teacher might not be able to help you with, a personal, like a decision your parents are making. But at the same time, there can be some, what are these people? What can you be, who would be good to ask about this question? And that's, of course, it's, with autism, it's some of these things came to us intuitively. We recognize that, we had a teacher that was kind of nice to us, and they were, so we asked him a question, when we were growing up. We may have, a neighbor that actually, is really enjoyable to be around, but that's what's intuitive to us. It has to be overtly said to them, because sometimes, that's part of what I know Christine and I do a lot is like, we make the covert overt, in the sense that we say, this is how you talk to people, or you could ask a question to somebody. And you might even just say, and if it is a person who is a minor, who is with their parents, is to say to mom or dad, or, whoever their guardian is, to say, Johnny has difficulty with asking you about his math. He's having difficulty in math. So, it's okay for you to ask it, like say, hey, because they may need you to do that at times. I have several that's typically what I do is when they have, I let them know, I'm not doing it behind their back, but I let them know, that I talk to their parent, tell their parents when they struggle. So, because sometimes we problem solve, and then they bring it to that person, to their child, because it is sometimes stressful for them to kind of think multi-levelly and, really thoroughly. Some can do that really well, and some are just like, I know the answer, and just leave me alone. So this is what happens when you're stuck. So this is another one I wanted to I created just to say, because again, in the very literal, we're in the mix of life. What do you do when you're stuck? So part of it is, again, looking at, can I ask for help from somebody? Can I recognize that I'm getting frustrated in this body of mine, that I can feel my neck is getting tense, my stomach is there, my face is like grr, you feeling it's not working, you're feeling overwhelmed, and kind of process that. Have you been working too long? Now, all of you probably have had that experience where you worked a little bit too long. You're starting to feel a little fatigued, you're getting annoyed with the things aren't working out right. Partially, that's where people are, and that you need some help with those things. So it's partially, and then there's only one way to see it, and this is the way you see it. So this is kind of like what stuck is like, and that probably covers everybody getting stuck. And it's partially, again, how do we step away from it? How do we do something a little different so we can, kind of manage what's going on here, and kind of can move forward. And then, so asking for those, who do you want to have on your team? So that's exactly what Christine was saying before. It is easy to forget to ask for help. You could just say help, and it can just be practicing. And sometimes in therapy, that's what we have to practice. How would you say, I need help, I don't know what to do here, I really don't know, what I can do who can I ask? Now, sometimes, especially as kids, certain issues, the parents, if they go ask help to their parents, it's not that their parents has the ultimate answer, but they can help them to kind of support them in the process, because sometimes that's what's needed. Okay. And then, so, naturally teenagers struggle with the connection to their parents and seeing their parents as being, I don't know, smart. It just seems like, I remember a long time ago, I went to a training on adolescent development. I just thought it was so funny because the man, he began the training, I said, good news. My 21-year-old realized that I am intelligent, that I actually have things to share, and so we all laugh, because there is something about, that age. It's just very, very normal that you go through an age that, that through puberty, through that, the teenage years, that there's a time where, maybe at 10, you were, your child thought you were smart. And then at some point, you're really not. But at the same time, it's important to encourage that teamwork, the saying that parents are there, and it's different when they're adolescents. And that's often, I'll talk more about this in the parenting one that I'm doing in December, because I feel like sometimes, parents, it's a challenge, sometimes when you're, when children are 5 and there's other challenges, but you are in control. And then when puberty happens, and then the brain decides, regardless if you have autism or not, your brain decides, it starts to see things differently and to say, well, I want to figure this out. It's my turn to figure things out. And so sometimes that's a challenge for parents to recognize, how do I do that in a way that is maturity appropriate and can work, versus treating them like they're 10 forever, which often causes conflict, because regardless, children, adolescents need a chance to kind of explore. And that's really where when I talk about goals and challenges, sometimes, or new things that they can try, I'm talking about those kind of things because they can step out a little bit while they're in their parents' care. We had, I've had, different cases where, people didn't really want their, they're trying to protect their child from everything. And, every good parent wants their children not to face a lot of terrible things. We all get that, but at the same time, it's more, we give children opportunities as they grow older to manage and face different experiences through sports and school, and maybe other opportunities in the that they come across, because we want them to kind of figure things out while we're still around. And because at some point, if we just if we protect them, overly shelter them, by the time they're adults, it's going to be kind of like they don't have any skills, and they may, just by their own sake, just because they can when they're older, is just to kind of not be there anymore, or just kind of not rely on their parents when they, we all needed our parents. I know when I might have been a grown up at 2021, but I certainly needed my parents to kind of navigate some of that adult stuff that is not, it's all new. So that's why I suggest, parents can help the child have a realistic goals, and learning what it means to pace yourself, and recognizing when it's time to put things away, when it's time to start, and recognizing that it's not a bad thing to have others to input. It doesn't mean being critical, or it just means it's important to, the more that children learn that when they're young, it kind of can set them up to recognize, oh, I'm not by myself in this. I can ask for help here, or etc. So change in general is hard, but I would say transitions are one of the things, like when I find out, I have a client or learn of somebody who is undiagnosed with, I wonder if they have autism. This is one of the issues, is about how they handle transitions. I don't know, it's just in me that I'm really, even before I knew autism was my thing, even when I was in undergrad, I really had a thing about transitioning, and I even did a research proposal on transitioning from middle school to high school or something like that, because I felt like it's so significant that sometimes we move from things so quickly that we don't help children, we don't help people to really kind of process it and manage it successfully. And those with autism struggle with that even more. So, when I think of new things and new events, sometimes even like if you have just specifically that, someone going from middle school to high school, it's good for them to see the high school. It's good for them to meet the teachers. It's good for them, even if they can't go and actually go to every classroom, but they can be in the space of it because they are visual. It just helps them to know what they're going to do and anticipate. It helps them if they can see stuff on the web or stuff that can show them, this is where we're going to go on vacation. This is what we're going to be, some of the things we plan to do. I could verbally tell you, hey, we're going to go do this and that, but that is not the same as showing them some things that can be shown. So I feel like that's some of the things that can be very helpful to children to kind of, and for adults to say, this is what we're going to anticipate. And what the change is like to move from school to school. And helping them to kind of how do you create the anchor, when there is transition? How do we teach them to be flexible? And of course, the harder, I won't say the most, I won't say mysterious, is the one when they actually graduate from high school. So, that can be a very anxiety provoking because look at all those years, and all of us went through it. We all, we went through school. So at some point we stopped going to school, and if you had a plan what you were going to do after you graduated high school, your anxiety was probably less than if you didn't have a plan. And I say that, the predictability of recognizing, well, what are your options, and kind of talking about that, even if it's just an option of like, we're going to go on vacation in June, that can be helpful, just to know what is the plan. And even if, and being able to talk about how things are going to be different. The more it's talked about, the more likely they can kind of buy into it, and it's easier to handle. The more that it's kind of like put off, or ignored, especially if they're talking about it, then the more there's actually that can also cause them to be feeling like they can't trust the adults in their life, or can cause them to have an outburst in that situation. Again, putting things on calendar to see what would it be like. So like if you have a senior this year in school, it's November, there is a timeline. There's certain things that if you are considering they're going to college or going to work, what kind of job it's going to be, what kind of if they're getting a vocational program, what would it be? And so there's a step, like if you have a child and they're going to go to college next year, this time of the year is when people visit colleges, when they put in applications, when they're making decisions about what they're going to do. And if those kind of things are put out on the board of what we're going to do, that helps them to kind of relax and feel like, oh, this is how this works. And so that's about everything. So we think about that with like college or graduating from high school kind of makes sense, but but on a smaller scale that needs to be understood more and more detail for smaller issues like a vacation, or we're moving, or just different changes. Again, they see visually, so if you have a list, it's much more easier if they can see it. Let's see. So again, I joked about it. I thought to myself, I'm writing it in the angle of talking to an adolescent, so that because that was my perspective I wanted to give. But at the same time, I thought I would never, an adolescent would not, especially on the autism spectrum, handle, even if they were diligently listen to this would be too much information. And I would need to give them, I'll give them a little more break. So this is why I have this one. All this change can be stressful. So if you know somebody, who's graduating, who is a senior in high school, who is at that point where they're like, or they're, even if they're juniors, there's sometimes we're not thinking about it, but because it's not, it's because we think of senior year, it's like there's a lot of fun to it, it's, you finally achieve that, but sometimes you won't, there is a lot of anxiety as well. And so it's important to recognize how to teach them to take a break, again, to take time to laugh, forget things, take a walk, nap, Just again, understanding what self-care is, what is important for you to do, how do you rejuvenate, makes you smile, because that is the way to help them move forward. And that's what keeps us successful, is the kind of understanding in those routines. There are things that we could say, how do we decompress? I don't use that word with them, but but at the same time, I teach them those things. So this is, when you see it, it looks like a point of humor. So I'm going to introduce you to this young man. He is, I want to say Hunter. This is Hunter, and he's a little. I enjoy him because he's very dynamic in his speech, and he always makes me laugh when I'm listening to him. He's pretty long, so when I turn it on, you'll hear a few seconds, and you'll hear me leap it over because he has. Because we don't need to listen to it all because it's a lot. But I like his perspective. He is an autistic man who lives in Colorado. And so he has, I just have enjoyed what he has to share about these things. And here we go.
Self-care is garbage. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I'm having a little difficult. What is? Go ahead. Let me try this again.
Self-care is garbage. Yes, you heard me right. It's crap. It's bunk. It's ridiculous. And I don't buy into it. Essentially, all self-care is a flex for rich people.
Okay.
But I will say this, it may be good to take an inventory of the things that really recharge you and bring you joy, whether it's creation, consumption, or something else entirely. For me, here's what helps me actually practice self-care in a very highly compressed, ordered, structured, busy routine. I like to look at a couple different things, but my key element is what I call microdosing. You may have seen this in relation to like performance-enhancing drug use among athletes. Are we talking about the same thing here? Yeah, this is essentially going to enhance your self-care. But for me, I like to look at really small luxuries with intentionality. So I joke about getting an extra taco at Torchy's Tacos. I usually, for just reasons on my own, will finish my showers cold just because of the way it recenters my mind. It's a little bit of a toughness build. But when I want to treat myself, I don't do that. I just take like a warmer shower or sleeping in an extra 15 minutes. You may find that even though you're not going to be able to retreat for an entire weekend or do like really big stuff like everybody else seems to have the liberty to do, find small things that help. Even if it really is something as simple as maybe going to a Starbucks and getting something that isn't just black coffee every once in a blue moon. I know the rest of you basically go to the Starbucks drive-thru every single day, but that's not me. But if I really want to, quote, treat myself, that's a little bit of extra self-care to where I'm going to enjoy a milkshake. I'm going to have something a little bit sweeter. I mean, just the other day, I put lingonberry jam on an English muffin, and normally my breakfast is a lot more Spartan. Those are small things, but I'm very intentional about micro-dosing and being able to build those in and saying, you know what? I'm going to sleep in. I'm going to take an extra warm shower. I'm going to put a dollop of that lingonberry jam on my English muffin toast, and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to take care of myself just a little bit there. Okay, if you're still with me, here's the grand truth, and here's why I finally decided to do a self-care video. I was talking with my friend Josh, and he relayed that the way he looks at self-care is based on getting my angles right. Golly. The way he looks at self-care is based on 4 different quadrants: body, mind, soul, and heart. And I love that. So I'll even like put that in a little box. And I don't know if I can put up a slide here, but body, mind, soul, and heart. It really helps to break out your self-care actions by kind of looking at different parts of your holistic self. For me, I enjoy being able to take care of my body by building strength. You may find that there's certain self-care practices that benefit your soul. My mind is always too busy and too quiet to meditate. Yeah, think about that one for a second. But in the mornings, I do like to journal. I do my own kinds of meditation practice, if you will. I have my coffee when it's very quiet, and that benefits my mind and my soul. So I get a little bit of both there. For you, self-care for your mind may be reading a book, or it may be practicing guitar or learning to code. So your components may be incredibly different. Heart's another good one. Like maybe go out on a date, talk to a friend, have a long conversation, find ways to reconnect with the people that you care about. Do something fun with your kids. Have a heart moment. When you break it down into those quadrants, it's a lot more intentional. So instead of me sneering at somebody who's using like a megaton bath bomb and thinking that that's self-care, I need to think about what self-care for my body looks like, for what my heart looks like, and for what my mind and soul look like. But there's one final piece to this that I think really amplifies the self-care scenarios for autistic people. So I do like to consider the concept of the holistic self for autistic people. So you may have heart, mind, body, soul, earth, wind, fire, what have you, but then there's like the autistic underpinning to where there's the stimulation aspect, there's the routine aspect, there's the absence of noise, there's the presence of sensory elements. So for me, like I may find that like certain mental care for me may just be enjoying quiet. Like I'll just stare out my window, watch the leaves on my aspen turn beautifully, and I can enjoy those small moments of peace because my autistic brain needs a little bit of sensory deprivation to center itself. Same thing with routines. There are times to where, like on my birthday, for instance, I enjoy going through a normal routine day. The fact that I can hit all the points in my routine is a form of self-care. The lack of surprise is actually really soothing for me. So as you analyze your autistic self, it's okay to put self-care on your terms. It may not look like a manicure or a pedicure or a massage or a skydiving trip. It might look like something a lot more different, whether it's loud, whether it's quiet, whether it's meditative, or whether it's just squishy by being in a really cold blanket. Like, wouldn't it be cool if weighted blankets were actually cold the whole time? I would love that. So self-care needs to be less about what other people do to care for themselves and what you, yourself, and your autistic self can practice for you, because you do need it, and that's okay. Look, at the end of the day, I still think self-care is kind of garbage. I think the stereotype is crap. It's bull. I think we really need to do what this looks like. I think we've gone the wrong direction of what social media and society kind of blast upon us as what self-care should be. I mean, for goodness sake, like I don't want to get a pedicure. Like, that's not self-care for me. We should stop those kinds of associations. Anyway, I hope you found this somewhat helpful. I do feel like self-care can be a lot less garbage and not more glamorous, but more glorious and more embraced and more gracious, because you need it on your own terms. I'd love to hear what you do and what cares for yourself. Hopefully it's not kettlebell swings, but if it is, rock on, awesome. I'm right there with you. Just watch out. But anyway, let me know in the comments. Love to hear your thoughts, and do take care of yourself. Don't let anybody shame you into not doing it, because you need it for you. You're the most important part of your system, and you're important, so take care of yourself. Thanks for joining.
What'd you guys think of that? Oops. Oh, sorry, we're moving off head.
He was hilarious. I loved it.
I've listened to a lot of, during this training, I've listened to a lot of videos, and I think Christine and I have talked about this once before, because we wanted some of our clients, most of our clients don't have any contact, like a lot of them don't have any friends, or they don't know anybody that has who is autistic. And so sometimes videos are a way for me to kind of bring information. But honestly, some of the guys who are out there are not as dynamic as this. They can be very, and when you're talking to a guy, you really want to have more of a guy. I want them to see other men who are walking in this life and how they can manage. And his were always, like, I've listened to about probably like at least 5 of them. So anyways, it feels like it's break time. So I'll just give you a 10-minute break, and then we'll kind of ease on down the road. And so it's 11:11 on my watch. So let's just go to 11. Let's go back to 11:20, like we are 10:20 before. So it's a 9-minute break. All right, we'll see you soon. Great, let's get this. Ready? Come on. Okay. So part of this is, so we're going into a little more practical, like getting down and asking more specific questions, and why both are good. Those who are on the autism spectrum, and that's the challenge, I think, differently than other developmental disorders, is that truly you can have somebody who's more, how do I say it, like has more of it. They could have an intellectual disability, be more where they can truly they're not going to live independently. They are relying on others. There's certain concepts they don't get, that sort of thing. And then there'll be those, really that could be, PhD, have a PhD and be successful in the world and very independent. So I say that because that's what makes it challenging. Some people really will benefit from learning how to get a job and establishing themselves that way. And some are made for college, and that's where we want to not assume one or the other, based on the person's strengths and aptitude, because it's all different. So, if you don't know who this is Temple Grayson. She is an amazing woman. She's in her 70s at this point. She has a degree in animal behavioral science. And so she works a lot with the cattle industry and all kinds of different ways that way. But she has autism, so she has a lot to say about it. And I wanted you to hear from her. This video is a little bit longer than the last one, but I think it's well worth it. She says a lot of good things, and she comes from that authority of really being on the autism spectrum herself, but also understanding the trends that are going on right now.
What I want to get you thinking about is the world definitely needs all the different kinds of minds, because different ways of thinking give you a lot of variety and better ways of solving problems. Now, I want you to think about these two really super important innovators, Steve Jobs and Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein had no speech until age 3. In a lot of educational systems, he'd be labeled autistic. Steve Jobs was bullied. I was bullied in school too. And the only places where I was not bullied was where I had friends through shared interests. And for me in high school, it was horses and it was electronics. But both of these people, if they were young children today, in a lot of school systems would probably be labeled autistic, dyslexic, or some other label. Now, Thomas Edison, another one of our great inventors in the US, was the inventor of the light bulb. He was a high school dropout. His mother homeschooled him. He was labeled hyperactive, and I probably had autism. One of the things that Edison did is he memorized every street in his town. That kind of sounds kind of autistic. Now, one thing that helped him is he learned to work at a young age. He was selling newspapers at a very, very young age. And one of the big problems I see today, a lot of kids with the labels are not learning working skills. And I'm seeing a lot of grandfathers come up to me, grandfathers that maybe were NASA space scientists and helped on our moon program, going to the moon, one of the greatest things our generation ever did, my generation. And that grandfather is finding out that he was probably autistic when the kids get diagnosed. And he was a NASA space scientist that helped us get to the moon. Now, Jane Goodall's another interesting person. She only had a 2-year secretarial degree when she did her famous study. Would that be possible today? I get concerned about academic barriers of entry. Steven Spielberg, he was dyslexic. He actually got rejected from a top film school because he had poor grades. But one of the things that helped Steven Spielberg to be successful is when he was a child, he was given a movie camera. So he got exposed to movies when he was really young. People asked me how I got involved in the cattle industry. I got involved in it because when I was a teenager, I got exposed to it. Students get interested in things they get exposed to. And we got to get students out doing a lot of things. I see a lot of kids growing up today, they've never used tools. They're totally removed from the world of the practical. I think that's a gigantic mistake. My next slide on the different types of thinking. It's one of my most important slides. I am a visual thinker or an object visualizer. Everything I think about is a picture. And I just discussed that years ago in my book, Thinking in Pictures, which is available in the UK from Bloomsbury. And being a visual thinker helped me in my work with livestock, because you want to understand animals, you've got to get away from verbal language. I absolutely could not do algebra. Now, another kind of thinker, might also be on the autism spectrum, is the visual spatial mathematical thinker. So you have a person who thinks in photorealistic pictures, then you got a person who thinks more in patterns, the more mathematical kind of thinking. And these are the people who be good at computer programming. We need to be taking the thing that a child's good at and build on it. And then you've got another type of thinker, they think totally in words. They also tend to be very linear, where visual thinkers like me tend to be associative. I'm learning more and more about how to communicate with people that are that don't think the same way I do. So the first step is understanding that you think differently, because when I was real young, I thought everybody was a visual thinker. I didn't know my thinking was different. And then when I was in my late 30s, I started learning that my thinking was different. Now I'm going to show you some brain scans, and this first brain scan shows a big, huge visual thinking circuit. This is a slice right through my head, right through here with a brain scan. And the next slide shows a slice right through here. You can see another big visual thinking circuit. And then a third slide shows some abnormalities in the left hemisphere. And this explains why I have no working memory. So here's a hint that can help people that are different. Do not load working memory. Multitasking on a busy takeout fast food window, probably not be a very good job for me. When I was a little kid, it took me time to respond on my speech. I cannot remember long strings of verbal information. So for tasks that involve sequence, it's going to be a whole lot better if I have a pilot's checklist. Now, I get asked all the time, this next slide shows, how do you determine what kind of thinker a kid is? Well, the visual thinkers, when they're in primary school, they're going to be good at art. They may also be really good at building things. So take that ability in art and build on it. Build on it. The mathematical thinkers might be good at math. Then you need to take in the child and give them more difficult math. And then the verbal thinkers tend to like writing. And so let's take the thing the kid's good at and build on it. That's really, really important. Now, unfortunately, there's still quite a lot of problems with discrimination out there. When I started out in the 70s, being a woman in the man's cattle industry, that was a bigger barrier than autism ever was. And I was just reading material from Sienna. She's a student in the UK, very, very good at math. You know, went to top math things, went to top math school, and was treated very badly there. No, that is absolutely not right. And today in the cattle industry is welcoming women, but maybe in math, we need to get a little more welcoming. Let's talk about some famous women in math. Katherine Johnson, and she calculated all the trajectories for our first spacecraft to help us get to the moon. And Grace Murray Hopper, who invented the very, very first computer programming. You know, these people often get forgotten. They're just getting recognized today. Now, the next slide shows my grandfather's autopilot. My grandfather and another person who was probably autistic, was the co-inventor for the autopilot for airplanes. And 3 little coils, you could sense which way the plane was going. People in aviation thought it was crazy, but autopilot for airplanes was basically invented by a traditional MIT trained engineer, that was my grandfather, and another person who had this crazy idea. And it was in every plane in World War II. But the thing that is sad is the stolen version was in most of the planes in World War II, stolen by the Bendix Corporation. But my grandfather did get compensation at the end of the war, and it went into tons of commercial planes. Now you look at this autopilot and it looks pretty simple, but sometimes simple things really work. Now the next slide just shows the classes we need to be keeping in the schools. We've taken all the hands-on classes out of the schools. We need to be putting those classes back in. The other thing is, there's a study that shows arts foster success. A scientist that had a creative hobby was more likely to win a Nobel Prize than a scientist who was just a regular scientist. Now the problem I had is, since I was weird, how did I sell my work? Well, what I learned to do is I sell my work, not myself. So I would simply show off pictures of my jobs. And this next slide shows the dipping vat project that I designed, and I'd put the drawings out there and people go, wow, you did that? And then I've got another slide of another project, and I used this slide to sell the one of our very large meat companies to have me design the front end of all of their big meat factories, and I sent him that drawing. Next slide shows a curved cattle handling facility. That was one of the pictures I put in my portfolio. So basically what I did is I showed off the drawings, showed off the pictures. Next slide shows the dipping vat system I designed for that were shown in the HBO movie project I did back in the 70s. Next slide shows my brochure. It's not in color because in the 70s, colored printing was extremely expensive. So I had a real professional brochure. I just showed people what I could do. I want to show some more pictures of jobs. Here's another slide labeled Half the Cattle in North America, handled in systems I designed. And then I got 2 black and white slides of the dipping vat system. A lot of stuff was black and white in the 70s because it was so much cheaper. Now, what worries me is that our educational system, I think, screening out a lot of smart kids. Us visual thinkers, we absolutely can't do algebra. But the thing is, engineering needs visual thinkers because engineers calculate risk, but I can see risk. And when I found out why Fukushima burned up, I was just shocked. Simple watertight doors could have saved it. You see, I see the water coming in there. The mathematician doesn't see it. He doesn't see the water flooding the basement, drowning the electrically operated emergency cooling pump. I can't design a nuclear reactor, but I do know electric motors don't run underwater. You know, it's that simple. Next slide talks about the Boeing MAX airliner disasters. Engineers calculate risk. I see risk. And engineers like their jargon. Impact with terrain, that's jargon for crashing. Okay, the next picture shows a picture of an airliner, and that arrow is pointing at this little tiny fragile thing that's no bigger than this pencil sticking out of the plane. It's called an angle of attack sensor. It measures whether or not a plane is going to stall. Normally, that just acts as an instrument to inform the pilot that he's in danger of stalling. But Boeing hooked this very fragile thing that a bird can just rip off a plane directly into the plane's flight controls. And they forgot to tell the pilots. This is really basic here. And I look at that and I go, you wired that thing to the flight controls and didn't tell the pilots? Yes, the bird rips it off. What do you think happened? And the pilots are back on the plane thinks it's stalling, so the computer's shoving the nose down like this, and the pilots are going like this back on the yoke, and the plane crashed. It was a disaster. And I wouldn't have made that mistake. I would have seen that. The next slide just shows a big food processing plant. I'm concerned in that in a lot of places we're taking the skilled trades out, and we need skilled trades in engineering. I was watching some very interesting videos just the other day on making big turbine blades. They had the coolest scaffold for building the tower for the turbine. Well, probably someone's a visual thinker made that scaffold. Also, they're layering on all the fiberglass and the graphite fiber fabric. Really intricate process. If it's done wrong, the blade's probably going to break. Real interesting. We need our visual thinkers. So the thing I learned on building large food processing plants, who does it? The degreed engineers would do things like boilers, refrigeration, make sure the roof isn't going to fall down. But the visual thinkers like me, we did things what I call the clever engineering department. Think packaging equipment, all of the really clever kinds of things. And these people are not getting replaced. That's the problem. And back to Holland and Germany, they've been shipping a lot of very expensive food processing equipment over to the US because we're not making it anymore. And what's caused this is taking welding and shop class out of the schools 25 years ago, paying for that. Big mistake. You're probably doing that in the UK too. Now the next slide, I'm just going to talk a little bit about thinking before wrapping it up. Computers, artificial intelligence, autistics, ADHD, and dyslexics were bottom-up thinkers. In other words, you take a lot of specific examples and you put it into categories. Top-down thinkers tend to overgeneralize. Okay, we've got kids with this label, then we just assume they can't do anything. For me, I understand specific examples of different things. So how do I learn something like good and bad? Well, if I put gum on the teacher's chair, that's not robbing a bank. You can have different degrees of something being good or bad. I hold the door open for somebody, that's really, really nice, but it's probably not Mother Teresa. So you can have, with specific examples, different degrees of something being good or bad. That's I had to be taught that. Here are just some tips on kids that think differently. Do not overload working memory. Multitasking is not going to work. When I was learning to talk, I had to be given time to respond. I often have problems in interviews with interrupting, and that's because I don't get the timing right. I have a slow processor speed. But if I was a computer, I'd be an Intel 286. You can look that up online and see what that is. But I got the cloud for memory. I got some great big warehouse full of servers to be my memory. And give the kids checklists for things that involve sequence, like taking apart a machine and then you got to put it back together again. Give them a checklist, or just a checklist for setting up the cash drawer in a store. Real simple. We also have to take these kids and stretch them just outside their comfort zone and get them doing new things, but give them choices. Give them choices. And if you've got a problem with noise sensitivity, one of the ways to help kids get over that is give them control of the noise. So if it's something like a hairdryer, let them turn it on and off, where they control it. Really important. And we've got to limit the screen time. Now that's really hard with COVID, but we need to be having some time every day where there's going to be no screens. How about a meal with no screens? Because I'm seeing too many kids getting addicted to video games and they're not getting out there and designing them. And we need to have, choices to do a lot of hands-on things. This is my book of hands-on activities, Calling All Minds. It's available electronically, so that should make it easy to get if you have to order it from the US. But kids aren't doing simple things like making paper snowflakes. And hands-on things also teach practical problem solving. We're getting kids getting upset if they're not perfect. Now, I think what we need to be looking at, education, is what is the goal of education? I think we need to be looking at where is a child 10 years after high school. I was a lousy student in high school. I had a great science teacher who got me motivated to study, because now studying became a pathway to a goal, not just something to please the family, a pathway to a goal. Another thing with kids that are different, we need to be teaching working skills. That needs to start around 11. Maybe little volunteer jobs, church or community center. I know that's difficult now with COVID, but they've got to learn how to do a task outside the family. When I was 10 years after high school, I was doing those dipping vat projects that was shown in the HBO movie. And one of the things that really motivated me is I wanted to prove to people that I was not stupid. That was a really big motivator for me. And I want to see these kids get out and be successful. Also, there is scientific research that shows that the different kinds of thinking really do exist. And I talk about that research in my book, The Autistic Brain. That is available in the UK, The Autistic Brain, that the object visualizer and the visual spatial more mathematical visualizer, there's research that shows that they really do exist, these two different kinds of visualizers. And thank you for listening to my TEDx talk. Thank you very much.
So what do you guys think? I'm just going to turn this off or unshare for a second.
I love her. I love her. I love her.
Me too. She's so practical.
That was great.
That was really
She was
great.
wonderful.
Also a movie called Temple Grayson that I saw years and years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and it's amazing how so many adults, I have adults in my family now in their 60s that did not know that, they were autistic. And then as we had grandchildren who were autistic, they're like, I think I'm autistic.
And that, yes, I think that's happened to a lot especially, you know, because unless it's like a, I'm actually doing a video blog for the website, and the question I was asked was, why is there more, you know, why is this diagnosis more now? When I did the research, it's like one in back in the olden, like I say 70s and 80s, is 1 in 2,000 that was diagnosed with autism. And I'm confident that it wasn't because the autistic individuals weren't there the way we see a spectrum now. It's just that back then they probably saw them more as they had to be very, probably were nonverbal, not really in the world, like very much the kind that don't really know how to interact with the world. So yeah, and that's like, and now they're realizing things, and it's like, oh, that's why I'm like this. And so getting diagnosed is often helpful for older adults, not because it's going to help them with their, obviously, their education or something like that. It really just helps them understand themselves and maybe begin to look at their world differently. But that's really how I feel like anyone I knew was I diagnosed as a client or as somebody I knew personally. It was just really because then they could say, oh, now I understand why I'm like this. This is what I can do differently versus like the traditional ways that we would think of either counseling or helping people, or give advice, I should say. But I really enjoy her because she's very practical. And so I would say that I guess I was inspired. I was listening to her. I said, so those of you who work with that age group, from 10 to 20, or even adults, it's like asking, is that on your treatment plan? Is like you're like your next step, or what you're going to do after are you exploration of things outside of, obviously you're not responsible for, that's really a parent thing or to do, but at the same time, it's not that, if it's important as you're leading those conversations to say, hey, what are they being exposed to? What are their interests? And I think every time I hear her, she says, watch, because it's so easy to be addicted to video games, and it doesn't, did you hear her say that? They should be not playing them so much as designing them. And it's like, that's what a simple thing. And it's like, but sometimes they're not getting out. I'm not saying that video games are terrible, but they all should be in time, there's a right amount, and then there's a excessive, and they would prefer it because it's easy for them to do that way. So let's move on. So in celebrating that is just kind of recognizing some of the things that that Temple was talking about, and just what I've seen in the studies is like what people are able to do. And, so there's the visual orientation of art and design, in animals, good with facts, aptitude, and I loved her, her example. She's like, I'm like a 286. I mean, I can remember, if those of you who are old enough to remember those computers, I mean, I have a picture in my head, my visual mind, of what that looks like, and how much we've grown. But I love how she said they have memories of like a cloud, because that's those who I've worked with. I mean, not their working. So when she's talking about working memory, she's talking about what I like to call executive functioning. But in terms of their understanding and remembering, it's almost like, well, back in October 23rd, you said this. That is sometimes how it's like, well, just because I said it doesn't mean that I wrote it like as a fact that we're going to do that or something like that, because like sometimes can be a challenge, because they'll remember things that sometimes the adults won't remember. But these are some good things to recognize. I like the fact that there can often be spatial or other issues. Let me just see if I can how to get see how we can. Okay. Let's see. So I would encourage you to just look and see, and that's why they're exposure. So like to nature, I do look at some of Temple Green's books. I'm planning to get them in the next month, and she has one that she mentioned that's about how to be an inventor, and she also has one that's actually about how to become an outdoors, like to be an observer, almost like a scientist outside, and observe the nature. And I thought they were very practical. They're real easy. They're not like little children books. They're more like, I would say, like elementary and early middle school kind of things. But at the same time, they're just really like very practical, like this is what you can do. I think that's, sometimes what we can get kids excited about, trying new things and, doing seeing their role. So what is realistic? So when I think of this question, I do think of Christina, because that was one of the things she said to me. She said, we need to make sure that we have realistic, because back to that client who wants 6-figure income, like most people are, is, recognizing that, how do we achieve this? And how do we have goals that are match the strengths? Because to say, I don't know if you guys have heard this, because I just heard being around kids and just people in general, is that they'll be a child and they'll say, I want to be a lawyer when I grow up. And I'll say, why? Well, because my mom always said that because I argue. Well, all of you who have been around a few years know that being a lawyer has really little to do with arguing. It really has to do with that you really like to read and you really like to know how to decipher things. And so sometimes I just point out the obvious, and people don't always like that, because I can kind of shatter people's dreams when they're little kids, but it's being realistic. It's like, oh, good, you like that. I don't say like you can't do it. I just said, do you like to read? Because there's an awful lot of reading and writing in being a lawyer. And some of them are like, that's awesome, like that's what they want, but then some don't realize it, because it's all about just being sassy to their mom, or having good arguments, which they may actually be a good way of starting. But I also ask the practical questions around it, because I'm realistic, like this is how it works, this is how it happens. And asking, for them to ask, am I open to feedback from others? Again, I want to be a doctor. It's like I heard somebody recent, told me, they were thinking about wanting a job until they took a class and realized that they, in anatomy, and realized, wow, how about no? That will either make or break you. We all, I'm a helping professional, but I've learned long time ago that as I almost got nauseous looking at a surgical room, that was not going to be something that I would like to do. I'm really glad when people are put together and I do not have to deal with some of with the other part of being like the insides of the body. Mental health is my area. So anyways, and that's really important to kind of recognize, because when you think about it, when you were that age, and when you were like wondering about where what you thought would be fun to do, you always have to understand that there's more going on. And as we get older, we recognize, as time matures, we can be more realistic, like, oh, that's what I'm not really good at, or actually I don't like math that much. Most people, they have a dream, and then it becomes something better, like they becomes more of what they're capable of doing or willing to do. Hold on a second, I'm trying to and so sometimes learning from other people and being exposed. So let's see, to new things. And so this is where, again, back to what Temple was saying is, it's about, what are you curious about? And really, as adults and the family, and if as you're working with other, with the parents, with guardians, and et cetera, is to really say, what do you notice about Johnny and the way he's handled? What does he get excited about? What does he enjoy at school, or even just things that you see when he's messing around, or if he could research something, or when he's excited when he sees those kind of things, or the things that he likes to get, like for presents and stuff like that. Sometimes just asking can be a way for people to say, well, is there a way to develop it? I mean, as she was saying, if you have somebody who's good at math, then can you encourage them? Can they learn coding? Is that something they would be interested in? And that would be, why not get them, to open those doors and to help them to research that. So that's something that, if they're, depending on their age, having them research some information about something and seeing a video can really make a difference to say, well, I would like to try that. Maybe I really always liked animals. Can I volunteer at the SPCA, or do something that would be, I have a friend who has a dog that, I can go walk it, or something like that. It can be something very simple that they can learn more about, that the exposure. Even just think about how you started to, where were you at this age? Where did you start to explore different things that led you to be here? It was usually there's some things that begin our process of saying, oh, I like this and that, I don't like this, and it's sometimes, again, we just work through it and encourage them to try small things. Like she said, pushing them to try something different, not like jumping, throwing them in the deep end of the pool, but actually just letting them say, well, what would be the next step? And like, maybe we can, get you to get an opportunity to do these things. And sometimes that's where families and parents, there's ways of connecting them to people that maybe they wouldn't know. I mean, like say, for instance, that they liked horses and they just want to, hang out with them for sometimes, is there somebody we know? I don't know any personally right now, but that doesn't mean we can't find somebody. You just never know how that could be a real potential. And seeing those really good things that you see in a person that they can grow. Because really, I feel like mental health for autistic, people have had trauma, and I'm not minimizing that there are really some other comorbidity, but I feel like when people have a purpose and a focus, it really changes the way they view their future. Let's see. Okay. And so these are just some things, again, questions like thinking bottom up, like how you can add, like how can we assist with things, what are really needed, and can you, what is right? So like as a grown-up working with an adolescent is partially recognizing, like when I used to do in-home, I used to think, where will this person be when they're 25? Because when I think of 25, you're not like just like you just graduated, or you just, you've kind of established some things. When I would think, well, when I see you at 25, do I see you being kind of, mostly independent? I'm not saying perfect. I'm just saying, that you're able to manage your life, or do I see that you would need assistance in some ways? So part of it is kind of knowing that about a person, what would they need, and then helping them and, getting them connected to different services. Again, some of these are some of the things that we'll talk about in the December training, more practical, in a more detailed way about like getting them connected, but even having a volunteer position, opportunities, even if you have a friend who's has I'll say chickens, or has something that they would be interested in that is a good, or has a job that you've heard your child might be interested in, for them to just talk about it or even kind of show them pictures, etc., can make a difference. What have you learned, Christina, about, and what have you assisted your clients with in this area?
I'm trying to think how to answer that question. What have I done this as my clients in this area? A lot of times we just break it down to what they like to do and what they think they can do with that job. For instance, I have a client that loves history. So what can we do with history? What can we do? What can you do or capable of doing with it? Like with history, do you want to go to college for it? If not, can we volunteer at the local museum and something like that? And so I kind of make them think further than just like, oh, I want a job in history, so that's what it's going to be. So I kind of help them process, where can we move further?
That's great. I think that sometimes, like, again, being back with realistic, is that recognizing where they can do, we've had, like helped clients to fill out applications because they cause them a lot of anxiety. But at the same time, they're looking for the job that they applied for was not an entry-level position. And them understanding, well, I need this kind of money to be independent, so I want that kind of money. Not realizing it doesn't really, like having to explain again that it's that's a good goal to make, that you want that kind of money, but you have to recognize that there is a stair step to walk up to get that, and you have to be trained and etc. And know in that way. That's I think that's most young adults, or adolescents to understand that, but it's, I think, more difficult. And can they go to vocational school in high school? Now, even if they're brilliant and they're going to go to college, sometimes having a practical like exposure to things, they may like it. I mean, I had a client who, after he graduated from high school, he went into working as apprentice and as a welder and making really decent money, especially as an 18-year-old, because I think he had some exposure to welding as in high school. And so that, it's a simple thing. It doesn't, welding isn't for everybody. But he had some goals and he had some very strong interests in doing things. And so that was, he knew he really, this was the way he knew to do it. And he has his family support in that, which, so he's, doing well in that way. So that's important to kind of recognize that, how do we kind of encourage and, sometimes his real wish was to be a professional fisherman, like with the, that's on TV, in the contest and stuff. He had all the professional equipment for that is very expensive that he earned to do, but he had to have his parents help him be realistic and say, yeah, that's a long-term goal, but right now let's get into welding and because he can do that. Okay. So this one was one of the ones that Christina question she brought up. So Christina, what was your motivation of wanting us to discuss this question?
I have some clients that always ask, should they tell people that they have autism, or are people going to know, or even any mental health illness? They always want to know, well, should I be letting my employer or this person, that person know? And so we have the conversation of boundaries and how is it going to be helpful for you, for other people to know, and what barriers is that going to put in for you, and what opportunities is that going to open for you if you do disclose it to people and that they are willing to help you and work along with you.
And sometimes, and it's really, I wouldn't say always, never, that kind of thing. It's more about, it's the individual and helping them process it because it's their life. And so sometimes they don't want to tell. And sometimes telling might help them have a sensory break or help them, their supervisors know, hey, this is a challenge for them, or that they may need a break or something. But, I want to explain, like recognizing how to manage the social skills, because depending on the job, depends on how many social, what their social skills are really like. What are we all know, because even obviously in our own jobs, we have rules. There are certain things that we know about how our job works, our own duties, our responsibilities. But sometimes there's, like that's not, we are, we pick up on those things, and they need to be aware of how those rules are. And sometimes that those rules might be challenging to them and they may not understand, because some people just feel like they need to understand it for it to be like, okay to have that rule. Well, there's always rules that we don't always understand who started that. And it's not like that because it's a bad rule. It's just that, we just have, because people in general, we learn, oh, okay, it's all right. I'll just have to deal with that rule. And so I want to say, again, this is where I say the covert has to be overt. With those who have autistic people struggle with like picking up on the inferences, social norms, etc. And so it's about, like, if we say, this is how we do it, this is what dress code means, this is what being, when we need you to be on time, this is what happens if you're sick, etc. Because that's not something that they're going to pick up on or say, oh, I wonder about this. That's not how their brains work. And that they may not understand everybody. This is like questions I would probably ask those who are looking for employment as they're starting out. People may not understand you, but if you can get somebody to, that understands that you will work hard, because I feel like when someone really does well in a job, wow, they can be like the best employee, almost annoying to the other employees because they work so hard and because they're almost like they're singularly focused on it. And that, the struggle can be how to get a job. One of the things I've been focusing on or pondering lately through the things I've been researching is how often, you think of the interview you have to get the job you have right now, how much of it really was about, I hope there was some questions about actually what you're doing right now, but often it is really this game that we play, that it's like you're presentable, you look like you got a clue, and you say the right answer. Sometimes you practice them beforehand. And how much of that interview, the way you present and what actually happens in the interview literally has to do with the job you're doing. So that's really what the questions I see with autism is, that sometimes it can be that people are being overlooked, not because they couldn't do the job well, but because they don't know how to play this social game. And I heard of some people in England, I believe it was, that they're actually like, there was this company that instead of doing like normal like face-to-face interviews like the traditional way that you think of, is that they actually had them like sit down. This was more like a problem solving kind of, they all sat down and they had to do a problem, and it was like a problem, like a tactile problem. They had I forget the kind of, it was probably like a mechanical kind of industry, but it doesn't matter. They basically showed them, if you had this problem, what would you do? And they took care of it. And then that's how they interviewed them, instead of it being like, well, how are you? And, like those, like everyone who had an interview is experienced. So that's something that I would like to, I'm pondering and exploring in terms of how we can help, because I feel like that is a barrier when you don't understand how to do it. But I can show you the job. They can do the job well, but they don't know how to express that very well, or because they're not really social, that's not their social strength. So, and being afraid of new things, and what they can't anticipate the job. They can't anticipate new things, or how to, if there's, we always joke about, if you see the duties of your job and at the very bottom it will say other duties, because often there is a change in the I need to be flexible, but that's sometimes a challenge and it can cause anxiety. And I always want to put this, because this is an adolescent thing, not just an autistic thing, is not wanting to do that, the jobs that are yucky. And I say that not be just like the dirty jobs kind of thing, where they're like literally dirty or something like that. But I'm talking about that every single job has parts of it that aren't really fun. It's kind of like, you have a job right now, and guess what? I know there's parts of it that aren't your preferences. You have to do them because it's your job, but it's not, you have parts that you like and parts that are like, okay. And that's sometimes with maturity and with autism, it can be, I don't do that. Now, sometimes it's a sensory thing, and it can be like, we just help them process through that. And sometimes it's kind of like a grown-up thing. Like, you just need to understand that everybody, even the one that has their dream job, has parts to it that are kind of like, that's kind of a learning thing that we just have to help them address it and help them recognize, like, it's going to be okay. And it's kind of like, guess what? That means you're a grown-up, because growing up means we do things we don't necessarily like to do. We don't do things just when we want to do them. We do them when we have committed to doing them, meaning that we're at work, or we're, the task is going to get done. So here's some like a real basic thing I just put in here. I just kind of wrote up, because I feel like, again, making the covert overt is that, there are rules, again, in your position, what is expected of you, your pay, your schedule, what you're expected to do when you're off, what are your responsibilities, what kind of training will there be, etc. That that people get told when they start a job, or they agree to a position. But there's a whole bunch of other things that are kind of the unwritten expectations that, again, that we kind of figured them out, and most people figure them out intuitively, like, oh wow, I guess we can, this is when people have lunch, or we find out things about like how when we have a problem, what do we do, and so that's where our it's really important to have written, unwritten, like to discuss what are the unwritten expectations. So these are the things that are up front that everybody, like this is what you're almost like signing on the dotted line. But these are the things that are underneath. It's not because people are hiding things from you. It's just some things that people don't always just talk about. That what does it mean to have a what is the schedule really supposed to look like? What should I expect? And if there's rules, like say for instance, it's a job like that has a rotating shift, that it's not like you work Monday through Friday, but that you may work on, it's like a schedule that changes every week. Well, then that can be a challenge, not necessarily like it can't happen, but it has to be something that they would understand. Well, when will I learn this? So that it can be clear. People need very clear directions. Sometimes people will just say, well, just, over there, and they'll be very like, it's over there, and remember that place, and it's like, well, sometimes we just need more information, and it's okay to ask for that information. And really the idea of having, that there really is a social, hierarchy, but also like there can be those, way people talk to each other. I listened to one of those videos that was one by that Hunter did, and he has this whole video. It did make me laugh, and it was all on 10 reasons not to hire autistic individuals. And it's like, yes, I said, and he said it. And one of the things he said is that if you guys play these social games where it's really like a social club and then you work too, then don't hire an autistic person, because that will be frustrating, and because they'll want to work and they don't play those games. They don't know nothing. They don't understand that. And it's not interesting to them. And he had a lot of really insightful things about, what doesn't work and what's not necessary. So these are kind of things to kind of think of. And these are the things I thought of. It's not because like, this isn't the exhaustive list on either area, but it's an intention. It's important to be intentional for those who are on the autism spectrum to speak to them about both areas, that there are going to be things, because they're just going to think, just like Temple said, that I just assumed everyone was like me until somebody says differently, or if they know they're different, they still don't think, well, I don't know how different you are. They think if you you should follow the rules, all the rules, 100%, no problems. They should always do that. So that's really important to kind of recognize that piece. Any questions with this? Has any questions come up since then, Christina? Okay. Ooh. So we can take a break, and we're in the home stretch. So I'll give you a 10-minute break, because I think it is always good, even if we're almost done. Isn't this picture? Don't you want to go there? I mean, I just love that picture. Anyways, I will see you. It is now 8 after. So we're just being real on time here. We're just gonna do 20 after again. And then we'll be almost, we probably won't go all the way to 1 like planned. We're actually doing real well, but otherwise I'll see you in 12 minutes. Okay, let's go in. Okay. All right. So here's some more practical places to get started. Okay. So again, this is what could be really a practical way to address it with clients. This isn't about like what you feel like you need to do as much as maybe what you can help them to set it down, and for them to write things down, or and to see what are really their fears, what can be the next thing. And again, depending on who we're talking about, what their age or their strengths, it could be very different. And when you're talking about more like a 12-year-old, it's really not about like, what are you going to do at you're going to college or not. It could be just, hey, I see that you are good at math. Let's see if we can get you some workbooks. Let's see if we can get you some other ways that you might enjoy math other than like the classroom. Or it could be, it could be a lot of different things that can help kids explore their lives, explore who they are as people, because it's a pretty exciting thing. We do so many trainings, and I will continue to do things that are more, I'll say, difficult. And this is one of those things. It's like hope. It's like we all get excited, we all have memories of what we thought we would be when we were 5 or 6 or 12 or 15. And I think it's important to encourage that in them, and to see how we take a step at a time to see if they can overcome things. Because some things maybe are a challenge now, but it doesn't mean they can't overcome it. It doesn't mean they can't learn how to, it just means that they need exposure and with compassion. That takes a minute. So some things are scary. Change is scary. We all know that, but sometimes, and sometimes the most important thing is to do something new. And part of it is remembering what's been talked about, to help them to have their skills there, take breaks, recognizing their feelings and expressing them. So that means if you're the adult in their life, is to be the one to initiate that. Generally speaking, I would say those who are on the autism spectrum are not going to just come out and say, I'm really afraid, and this because of this, and this. They will when they have a relationship with you that they know they can say those things, but initially they need prompting. They don't necessarily understand their feelings. And so that's some of the work we do as therapists. You know, some can be just expectation of journaling. Now, journaling doesn't have to be writing. Sometimes people think, oh, I hate to write. It could be, well, sometimes because they hate this dexterity of their hands don't, hand or eye coordination isn't great, but they could put it on. It could be a video blog. It could be something that they do. They type it out. It could be a journal that they could describe things with pictures instead, because that sometimes it's not just about like, oh, they can't speak. No, it could be just that's the best way that stimulates and motivates them. And sometimes it's time to take a break. You know, again, throughout this training, I spoke a lot about, understanding overload, understanding how, like, what it means to take a break and understand your body so that you can recognize, I just need a break right now. And that let's stop doing this for a minute. Even as I was preparing for this week, for this training, which I had been doing for weeks, yesterday I didn't touch this training at all because I needed a break. My brain was more refreshed today to talk about this because I did it already. And talking about it more would have made it, but would not have helped me. It would have actually probably drained me. So in that same way, we need to recognize and help them to help others who have autism to recognize when they need a break, when it's okay to say, it's time, this is the time. Often those who struggle with mental health issues and autism, that's often very difficult for them because because of probably other issues and factors in their life. They don't really, they don't want to get, it's almost scary to themselves. Like it doesn't seem right to give themselves permission for self-care. It's important to try again. We've all been there that, it's like riding a bike, none of us, maybe somebody did, the first time that they tried a two-wheeler, that we automatically we just flew down the street with no problem. Usually it just takes a minute to understand the coordination and balance. And that's really where you want, we just want them to understand it's okay. It's encouraging them to try again, even when even if it was a disaster, like it was like, embarrassing or whatever. Sometimes it's like, well, let's try it on a smaller scale. Let's see what was, help them the problem solve. What was the problem there? And sometimes it's just because, it just happens. And it's just kind of like, and I think I'll try again too, because sometimes autistic individuals are perfectionists. They know what it should look like in their eyes. They think it should look a certain way. And they'll get caught up in the cycle of it needs to look perfect. Like say they're like writing something out, the writing has to be right. So they're focused on the writing versus the actual assignment. So sometimes it's kind of helping them like to recognize when they're actually being, they're focusing on the wrong part of the goal of the task, and to kind of help them to see how do we do this differently, because there is going to be, mistakes aren't bad. Mistakes are just the way we learn. Sometimes and it's okay. And sometimes they have to learn that that's okay. That's the way we all learn in that way. And it actually can be scary if we say they don't have to try more than once, then what happens is that they never grow, because any skill that you're good at, it's because you did it repetitively. And I'm sure and with everything, it gets better with time. If it's and there can be ways to help that. So, and then of course, just learn to ask for help. What is realistic? What is important? What should I do next? Sometimes we just don't know. And that's important to feel like it's okay to ask. And this is, again, we're celebrating them. You're taking a new step. Well, is this a realistic step? This may not be their verbiage, but it's important to kind of realize, yeah, you're ready for this. You're super ready. It's just new to you. And it kind of feels funny when something's new. It always does. It's like being, as they say, it's being comfortable with being uncomfortable sometimes. And that's a little hard. It's hard for all of us at times, but it's really hard for autistic individuals. Okay. So like I just said again, practice makes perfect. Christina, what do you got to say about this?
It's true. Practice does, practice does make perfect. We do a lot of things repetitively in my sessions. It might seem like we're doing the same thing every week, but it's because it takes that many times for them to process what I'm saying and process what they're doing.
Exactly. So this could be something that if you are a counselor or that you have a role of a relationship where you're trying to help somebody to do something different or better or a new skill, is to role play with them. You know, if when it comes to socially, like how to ask for help, it can be just role playing with them. Well, how would, if I was this person, how would you ask for help? And just letting them, because that repetitiveness will help them to do it. And it's a part of just, sometimes we just need cheerleaders to kind of just be like, you're going to make it. It's just that this is the rougher part of the job. This is the rougher part of learning something new. And all of us, everybody, I think you understand when I say this, is that, we can all kind of go up, like we have an interest in something, and there's always this hump that we have to get over to achieve mastery. And it's not just like about like, it's in everything that we can go up to this certain like I would love to be able to fix my own car. Well, I can learn like maybe the parts, but maybe then I stop. And if I keep going up to like, well, I'm going to learn this new skill instead, but I'm never going to let go of the hump of being frustrated and just working through it and doing the things that are uncomfortable, then I will never achieve anything new. And sometimes I find with my autistic clients that can often be a challenge, because it's like, if it doesn't come easy, then I can easily distract myself from doing it. And it's important to kind of like challenge that. Like, it's not the only way we do anything well is because we keep practicing. And but at the same time, is that really what you want to do? Sometimes it's kind of helping problem solve if that's the right thing, but it's something to kind of recognize. Sometimes we need to break and try again, and not to beat ourselves up about it, but because some skills just take a minute. Again, I just like this picture, but I think we're ready to take a break. So when you think of it, Christina, what do you think of taking a break? Why is this important?
I think taking a break is important because if there's a lot going on, and if they're not paying attention, then you're not going to get anywhere. So we need to step aside and let them take their breaks so that they can come back with a clear, focused mind.
Exactly. So part of it, and again, when we're working with our clients, is to recognize, what is your body saying to you? Part of, most of you probably know what HALT is. And so I just kind of added to those things. And part of it is, it's important to think about, if you are tired, that hungry, you're hot or cold, like something's not right, you're not going to focus the way you need to. And sometimes your brain just needs some quiet, like they were talking sensory wise. Quiet is important. Sometimes when I have a day of clients and meetings, my ears hurt. Now that may sound weird to you, but it's true. And I don't mean they hear like I need to have an ear infection, but they don't. It's like, I've been working too hard here now. Just give me like some silence. And then, that's what I need. If I put music on, it's sometimes not okay. I need to be alone. So these are things that, we want, it's good for us to understand, but it's really important to start to point these things out to our autistic clients and individuals that we know, because we want them to begin to internalize, right now, I think I need some alone time, or, what, I'm really hungry. That can, sometimes the focus can get away from what they're doing, but sometimes, but all of us have experienced that. If we're really hungry or annoyed, I have neck issues, and sometimes I just want to get that report done. I want to get it done. And I'm getting annoyed while I'm getting it done. And then my neck is, the more I sit, I need to get up and move around so that will alleviate the pain, but I still want to get it done. And so like, that's when I need to learn to take a break. So I need to internalize that. So I know my body enough to say, this isn't like an emergency. So let's, take 5 minutes. It can make it. It's amazing how even 5 minutes can make a difference. And I like to say, I need to stop thinking for a while. I need a brain break sometimes. I need to think about, I like going outside sometimes and listening to the noises, the birds chirping and the outdoors noises. I need to be intentional, and those who can easily focus on their their special interests it can get obsessive where that's the only thing they're thinking about, and their brain's all like really going fast. And it's important to say, you just need to step away for a second and then come back to it, and that it takes maturity to recognize that in yourself, that, oh, I just need to I like to say defrag my brain, it's just kind of that's what happens, because after a few minutes of just not thinking, maybe having something to laugh at, or looking at something pretty, that it kind of makes me have a brain again. And that's important. We want to understand, the need for some exercise. Sometimes that can be a challenge. Autistic individuals are typically because they do have often sensory issues where it can be difficult to do, movement is not difficult if they can't walk, but the actual coordination and the movement, the bilateral movements can be a challenge for them, but they still need it. So trying to get them to do some things and even take a little walk, move around the house, or stuff like that is very important to do that. And of course, the need to laugh. It's important for them to kind of figure that out. These are just ideas, but it's important to kind of recognize that we all need to take a deep breath and see. Sometimes when anytime we're busy, it's we can almost forget that it's we can act like everything is high alert and everything is it's an emergency and the world's going to end. But we have to recognize some things are really serious and it is an emergency, but more than anything, most things aren't. And so it's okay, if I take 5 minutes, I'll actually be smarter and I'll actually be able to finish it. And that's really what we want them to learn. And that's part of being a grown-up, part of being when we're little kids, somebody tells us to go to bed because we're not really good at that. But as a grown-up, we learn what's going to help us. And sometimes that we want them to learn to be attuned to what their body needs at that time.
Karen, we had a question. Christina asked, how do you deal with a resistant and demanding behavior in session? Right now, I am keeping firm boundaries and I prepare the client for what will happen in the session. However, I am recently needing resistance regression.
What do you think, Christina?
Honestly, I think the boundaries, you've got to keep them maybe right on on a board or on a piece of paper so the client can see what is going to happen in the session so that they're aware in the flow. But sometimes, honestly, the flow doesn't matter. They have things that they need to get out and they want to talk about, and what we planned is not going to happen. And we just need to give them that time to get what they have to say out and what they want to do out to even get attention at the end of the day.
That's good. What I'd add to that is that sometimes I think about a lot of different environmental issues. So when is the appointment at? Sometimes if the appointment is right when they get home from school or right when they've been rushing or something else is on their mind because somebody says something mean to them at school. Sometimes they've been running around to get to the home, because even if it's virtual, it could be that they have to get home in time to see you. So it can be that just helping them, and I like to say, you keep the structure and then, but you ask what, sometimes inside you just ask, why is there resistance? Is it just that I need to have, if I have to have my way? Well, that's one thing. And then you can kind of, address it. It can be that you have a session that's too long. Sometimes, depending on the age of the child, I wouldn't say so much with my adult clients that have autism, but those my younger clients or my clients who are on the who also have an ID diagnosis, I would say 30 minutes is a typical session directly with them. Maybe 20 minutes is really with them, and then I have more of the rest of the session, 45 minutes or an hour with the rest of the time with a parent or a caretaker, somebody who's involved with a person. and that's really their attention span. So not knowing the person personally and knowing the case, I would say just kind of recognizing what is, I like to explore instead of it being like, I need to have, this is what we said, so you need to just listen to me. It's more like there is a place where you want to like balance that of like, yes, I want you to, we're going to look at, this is the structure of what we're doing, but then kind of maybe observe, well, is there a need for some rest in the middle of that? Is there a sensory overload in what we're doing that there's a need for a break in the transition from activity? Or is there something else? Could they verbalize it? If we don't do this part of the session, is there something else they want to do? And maybe just give them a choice of like, if you don't want to do A, are you open to doing B or C? Just having an option, because sometimes people just need to feel like they have a choice. So, and so those are I hope that's helpful, because sometimes it can just be, they just need a minute to kind of regroup, and maybe starting a tradition that maybe they have they get their wiggles out. I know Christine does that a lot with some of her clients, where they get their wiggles out and they have a little movement time, and that sort of thing. I'm right now, I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm standing. I've stood for this whole training because I know that's how my body will do best. Of course, after we're done, I'm going to go sit down, but I do best because I can move around. I have my own pain issue. They have different things I'm dealing with that I do better if I can move, and that I can feel then when I'm sitting, it helps my neck when I'm standing. And that I'm just, and I give that example only to say, what does your client need? Is it possible that they need some moving around more? Is it that they're like, they just had such an overload after school that right now they just need to quiet for a second? So I don't, it can be that there's just trying new things. And sometimes it's not like, oh, well, let's try this. So it's like a balance of trying to like keeping your things, but also saying, well, what would be different? And seeing that maybe it's maybe not a resistance to you personally. It's just that I'm stinking tired and I didn't have no snack, and the teacher yelled at me today. Like, I mean, they may not be able to say that right away, but it can be that's, stuff like that. So I hope that's helpful.
She did reply and says that the client just doesn't want to talk. It's been that way across all settings that they've had any time of day, or the person working with the client, and they're just looking to see if maybe she regressed, and that, which is causing the not wanting to talk.
Okay. I would probably, when I think of a client who's more resistant, I really think of sometimes, again, when I go back to my clients I call those who are on the spectrum, I call them my now people, because sometimes it doesn't, to them, it's not, for some people, it's not really relevant as to why I'm here and why I need to perform to you. Why do I need to talk to you? And so sometimes it can be that maybe we need to talk less, and maybe that we bring in other things, and that we do more instruction with parents and I never discount, like if I can spend 10 minutes with a client and I spend the rest of the time with the parent, I don't think that that's a bad session. I think that's an excellent session, because I have such little influence compared to a parent. But if I can help a parent problem solve how to, and even if it's like, well, this is what I'm dealing with the behavior, and I can give them suggestions, that's not a bad thing. Some people with autism, this is a huge challenge to see you and to see myself. Some clients don't care at all. Others it's a real issue. I've even looked into like, would it make a difference if I told them they could be an avatar? Because this is like this social thing where I'm like this close to you. You can see how many times I've touched my nose in the last 4 hours, is really like can be overwhelming to them. And so I don't know, every client is different, but at the same time, I would ask, and I feel like even when a client really likes me, or not just likes me, but like really is engaging, it's really more about how I can help that parent get a clue, and how to readjust themselves to do what the child needs. And so that's what I focus on. And so, maybe, if there is something that's going on, maybe they, it's more detailed of maybe how they can figure that out, in that way. Let's see. And so, like, again, for teenagers, and actually even when they're younger, part of therapy can be is this way. And I think I would say this is what I would want for anyone who's working with, anyone who has a developmental disability, is how to learn to use your voice. Sometimes, when they use their voice, it's because they're really upset and they're screaming, and they might be not using, it's not really, they're expressing themselves, but it's not a language that people can like understand. Oh, you need this, or this isn't working. But it's important to kind of practice this so that they can learn to say, Christina, I don't like when you do that. Or I don't like Play-Doh. I don't like to play with paint. If they can, I want them to be able to say things. Sometimes, kind of like a Temple was sharing, our clients sometimes can have a slow processing of what I'm saying and how it gets out. It doesn't mean they have a speech issue. It's just sometimes if they're processing it, can take a bit of a minute. And sometimes we need to give them a minute to let them get out. This really scares me. This is not, I don't like this, or whatever. And so it's important to, train and teach them how to do this in that way. And to learn how to ask for help respectfully. I think that's probably one of the biggest things we do in therapy, in that communication. So we can teach them to say, I need this, or I don't like this. And even if they have to still do it, the fact that they can get it out, that this didn't work, because this is about learning how to respect themselves, so that and others we want others to respect them. Often I feel like that's, sometimes when life is fast, the respect doesn't usually get conveyed to them, or is not really a focus. So this is just kind of like a possibility of kind of really talking about, what's going to happen. We'll talk way more about this in our next training, but I really want to say, because if I was talking to a teenager, it would be, that they really are a legal adult at 18, that they really can make decisions. There are some things that they are responsible for, and that the laws apply to them, like that, that they're an adult. So even though they don't understand everything, there's the law is, the things are still there. So what we're going to do in December, we'll talk more about guardianship and what does it mean if they have like a power of attorney, like that's as for the grownups, how you can help support and protect them. But there is a point to this that, a lot of the clients I have, most of them that have autism, even if they really need dependent help, they usually don't have a guardianship. They usually, because they, as long as the parent, they have more of a power of attorney, but it's important for them to know that but a lot of them don't need them. A lot of them are, if they're capable, they don't need it, but it's a lot to think about being being a responsible adult. And sometimes that's really challenging for parents. So that's kind of some of the things we'll be talking about in the next training, how to help them process that and kind of see what the best solutions are. Sometimes it isn't, it's just kind of helping them walk through it. Because guardianship is more of the exception, I would say, of my clients that are on the autism spectrum. And it's expensive. So it's not something that you just do like signing a piece of paper or something. And there are times it's very necessary, but it's important for teenagers to really think about the fact that that at some point they're more responsible for themselves, even if they really do still need care, even if they still, will need to have supportive family or, have a coach or et cetera, or something that is more supportive and with some of the life management skills. It's still important for them to realize that they're an adult and that some things can be changed. It's important to kind of recognize they have what kind of providers they can have. If they don't like their doctor, that there are options out there, and they can learn how to make choices that are out there. Because I just think that that's important, because that's what we do as adults. And you want to help them I think it's good to help them to try to figure that out. We had one client that I think was Christina's at one point, that we wanted to help her. She was about to turn 18, and we wanted her to have beforehand to kind of be able, like, she wanted she recognized that as soon her adult psychiatrist, I mean, her psychiatrist right now wouldn't be hers. So we talked about like, well, this other psychiatrist would be available to be a, can take you now, and then you could keep them, have them when you're an 18-year-old. And that was a decision that she made, that she thought that was a good idea. That way her parents would still be involved, but at the same time, her parents like that too. That way they could help monitor or get started with it, and there won't be so many transitions at 18. So those are just some things in trying to figure things out. And there's a good things to talk about in counseling, that about what do we really want? And those, again, we'll talk a lot more about those things in the next session. So I just like to, and as you could tell, I like the outdoors. I like pretty pictures. Is this that enjoy the journey? It is amazing how little kids become adults. It just happens, it doesn't happen easily or taking it, but the years continue to go, and it's like enjoying what's the next step, and helping them to explore and enjoy and recognize that some things are scary about becoming an adult. Some things are unknown, and that's the uncertainty makes it really difficult for everyone. But at the same time, it can be a cool adventure in that way. So I just want to say, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to give you an opportunity. I'm going to give you opportunity just to see our email addresses if you ever wanted to email us or to know more, any questions. If you have any ideas, like we already have, our outline of what we're thinking about for the training that I'm doing in December for parenting, and that's really geared towards the adults that are working with those who are becoming adults. Well, actually, it's really geared towards any age child, because I think any responsibility is what you're learning is a way for kids to learn. Children learning responsibility is a way that they get are prepared for an adulthood. But other than that, if you have any ideas that you would like to you just put it in the chat. We would love to share things any questions you have. We have plans and doing more trainings next year. There's a lot of areas that there's just a lot of areas to cover that we do one at a time, in trying to help people walk through these things that life about. We want to really do a good I'll say have an option for people to really grow, to be successful adults, and feel like they're accomplished, they fit in society, that they're not just isolated, and that they can be successful.